Mundelein Elementary School District 75 Board of Education meeting. Will the secretary please call the roll?
DuPont.
Here.
Erickson.
Here.
Fingerhut. Here. Bryce.
Here.
Gallegos.
Here.
I'm sorry, didn't realize. Okay. St. Clair. Here. And Holly.
Here. Okay, the first item on our agenda, as always, is public comment. There is no one here in the room for public comment, but if there's anyone online that would like to do public comment, there's a 3-minute limit to try to fit everyone in, and then we'll resume the rest of our meeting if we have public comment. If you would like to make public comment, at the bottom of the Zoom screen, you could click on the raise hand icon, and our tech staff here will bring you, take your name and bring you up live on the screen so that we can hear you. Does anyone out there like to make public comment tonight at the board meeting? Nothing? One last chance, anyone for public comment? Use the raise hand icon at the bottom of the screen. Do we have people watching?
Yes.
Okay, great, thank you. Okay.
Oh, yeah, we have one.
Okay, we have one, excellent.
Oh, they brought it back down. Oh, it's back up. You want to let them in now?
Yes, please.
I'm sorry, I really wasn't. I just was saying when you were saying if people were watching. Yes, we are. We're watching. We're here.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we're going to continue on with the meeting. First, under the District 75 report, first we're going to hear a report from the business office. T.
Good evening. On tonight's business office report, we're addressing basically 2 items. That would be our 2020 levy, as well as an extension on the tri-district intergovernmental agreement. As it relates to the 2020 levy, we have received updated information from the county that estimates our new growth, which is a big portion of how much we anticipate to receive. This is an estimate. It will not be finalized until the spring 2021. But our documents within your board packet have incorporated those changes. As it relates right now, we're asking for a 4.9% increase, but we're only expecting about a 2.4% increase as it relates to the limiting rates. As it relates to the overall rate of the taxes, we're expecting about a 3% increase. What does that translate to for all of you and your home values? For every $100,000 of assessed value, you're looking at $37 of taxes. That's the increase related to District 75. So tonight we're coming before you. We're asking that you approve a resolution to put the item on display for public hearing at the next board meeting, as well as approve the estimation that we have provided in your packet. Any questions as it relates to the 2020 levy? Great. In your packet, you have the Tri-District Intergovernmental Agreement extension. This is the second extension on the 2015-2016 original agreement, and we're asking that the board approve this. This is for the rental services. Each year we do a different intergovernmental agreement that addresses how much each district is paying out and the portion that each district will pay. So this relates to the rental of the facility itself and the fees that the 2 other districts pay to District 75. Any questions? Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you, T. Next item on the agenda under District 75 report is the teaching and learning report. We're going to talk about the hybrid schedule.
Good evening, everybody. Tonight, what we are going to present before you and ask for approval on is the hybrid that we would like to employ when the opportunity presents itself for us to bring more of our students back into the buildings. as you've been able to see, there is a lot of roller coaster rides that we've been going on in regards to our ability to bring our students back into the building. So what we want to be able to do today is present to you the model that's taken place. It's went through a number of meetings. The collaboration, I would say, has been outstanding. Board members, if you just turn around, look behind you, the people sitting behind you are all the individuals that have been involved in this process. Christy's been participating, and so is Kurt on the committee, with helping us define what we think we can do best right now under the current circumstances. By no means would this be a final plan at any point. What it would be is steps that we could take place in order to see it potentially grow, because we know how it's changed since we think back to July. When we first met in July, we were looking to come back pretty much full time and be able to do that. We went into remote due to circumstances, and now we've got kind of a hybrid going. And what we're seeing is there are opportunities that will be available to us once we can get back more to the hybrid model full tilt. Until then, what we're trying to do is be prepared for that so that we can have some stability for ourselves as a school district, provide good communication for our staff and our parents so that they know what to be able to expect too as we work through this process. So with that, I would like to hand it off to Dan, and he's going to start going over some of the basics of what the committee has used as the foundational points to creating this plan.
Question, is there a difference between this and what was in the board packet?
Well, Wells, I don't know, where did you get that one
It
from?
was right here at my place.
That one is going to be the most current.
All right, okay.
Yes, thank you for bringing that up.
And procedurally, how would you guys like to field questions after certain sections or?
Boy, it's like I almost asked you to say that. So we did break this down into sections. The first part's going to be the protocols. So that'll be really Kathy, Shane, and Jamie. Once Jamie finishes hers, those will be the protocol questions we'd ask you to come forward with. So that'll take us through slide 10. Then slides 11 to 31, those are the academic components to it. If we could meld those together, because it'll be all similar. What I would ask is that if there's building specific stuff, that we do try to wait to the end, because we could get very detailed and stuck on a building and not be able to get through the whole presentation. And then the last part would be 32 to 41. Those are more the logistics that will be taking place in regards to transportation, the metrics, and any calendar changes that we'd ask for follow-up at that point. So if there are questions as the presentations go, I'd ask for clarifying points so to make sure that you understand what they're presenting for us. Good question, thank you. Mr. Short.
Thank you. I personally want to also thank all the people that are here presenting who have been part of the planning for this, and they are all behind you. So make sure that when you see them either in class or in the community to thank them for their time. And we know, like Dr. Meyer said, that conditions are changing, and this is a plan that's meant to be flexible in terms of the timing. So we're trying to be as prepared as we can. Next slide, please. I want to talk a little bit about hybrid and remote. If we go back one. Thank you. So the options that we want to give for families to choose where some of the learning takes place. When we talk about a hybrid model, we have learning taking place both at the home and at the school. And when they're at home, it'll be through remote methods. And sometimes at school, depending on the grade level, we will have some remote options that are taking place both at home and at school. And you'll hear about that from Mr. Pilot and his team. We are focused on a hybrid where we are making sure that teachers are strategically using that in-person time with the students in front of them to support their learners. We know that learning takes place in a lot of different modalities. Some of our students are really struggling in 100% remote, and some of our students are thriving. And that's why we want to make sure that we provide choice. And when we talk about a remote option, that's our current instructional model. It's 100% of the learning will be taking place online, away from the building, and through a combination of real-time, on-demand, and individual practice. We will continue that practice for those families that choose. Next slide, please. And while tonight we're going to be focusing on the hybrid because that's going to be the new plan, we want to make sure that everybody understands our commitments are to all of our students. And we're going to make sure that we provide choice, that the learning experiences are strong, and that we're providing support for social, emotional, and academic needs of each child. Next slide. As our team worked on this plan, these were some of the key decision-making pieces. We want to ensure the health and safety of our students and staff, provide a quality educational setting both online and in person, and then make sure that the structures are there to support the child. And so to kick this off, we want to invite our district nurse, Kathy Gazoulis, did I get that right? Awesome. To share a little bit about health and safety measures, and then we'll continue from there.
Good evening. I am Kathy Gazoulis, as he said, and I am the school nurse at Washington Early Learning Center. And I'm going to briefly go over the first component of health and safety of students and staff. Next slide, please. And you can go one more. Okay, so first, universal safety precautions. Under the first bullet point, temperature checks and symptom monitoring. We have systems in place in each building for staff and those entrances that are designated for staff. We have self-certification questions that need to be answered. Temperatures are taken daily and recorded at each entrance. Students are being certified by parents or aides on the bus and getting temperature checks before getting on the bus or coming into the building. Under multiple entrances, we've designated different entrances for groups of students coming into the building. For example, our students that come in for our self-contained classrooms at Washington enter door number 2. We have students also that are with the Park District e-learning hub, and they come in a totally separate door. Limit and control hallway movement throughout the day. So there is signage on the floor, excuse me, and there is also signage hanging from the ceilings to keep the flow going one way and another way on the other side of the hall. Social distancing. We continue to educate and reinforce our students and our parents with this message. We've used videos and stories to help teach the students about the importance of this precaution, and that has been very effective. I heard one of our self-contained teachers today as the kids were going out to the bus saying, "Find your bubble, find your bubble." So they're very creative. Our teachers are amazing. Hand washing, hand sanitizing used every time students enter and exit a room or the building. So there are pumps of hand sanitizer everywhere, outside the classrooms, inside the classrooms, and strategically placed around the buildings, including the entrances. And all of our sinks have been converted to no touch to help with that aspect. Assigned seating in the classroom and on the buses. So seats are assigned for students. This helps to maintain the social distancing. And also, God forbid a student would test positive, we would also know then who would be a close contact if the student was infectious. Masks with intentional breaks. We are allowing time in the school day for teachers to be able to schedule a time for students to be outside without masks while social distancing as needed. Each classroom and population is different, and I'm sure we all know after you've been wearing it for a while, especially if you've been running around or anything, you need a break. So we've allowed that into the schedules. Health office redesign, 2 separate spaces. All the health offices in the district have moved to larger spaces to accommodate a well and a sick area. They have air purifiers, they are social distance, chairs or cots. This allows students who are not feeling well or have a COVID symptom to be isolated from students who need to come into the health office for medication or have an injury. Individual materials, limited sharing. Students are either taking their materials home every night and bringing them back the next day, or they all have their own little boxes in their room where they leave their materials each night. If there is something larger that the students are using, that is disinfected in between students and a deep clean at the end of the day. Next slide, please. So, safety precautions for teachers. Providing time for safety precautions during the day. Another piece that has been added is extra time in the schedules for students who are participating in therapies or as students would be switching classes so that all surfaces can be sprayed down and disinfected and have the appropriate time to dry in between students. Masks for all students and staff. All students and teachers and staff have masks that are required to be worn at all times except for the scheduled breaks I mentioned. If a student refuses to wear a mask, there is a progressive disciplinary sequence that would occur, and the school would work with the parents and the student to come up with a plan. If after multiple attempts that did not work, the student would be asked to switch to remote learning. Building entrance procedures for all adults. At each entrance designated for staff, there is a self-certification checklist that staff must answer. Temperatures are taken and recorded daily. This is also the procedure for any guest that must be in the building. Remote planning days prior to hybrid beginning for working. Through procedural changes and allowing for planning. So the nurses, administrators, and staff continue to work together to keep updated on the most recent guidelines and trainings, which change frequently. All staff is completing a professional health training presentation that includes bloodborne pathogens, seizures, asthma, etc. The days that are going to be used for the hybrid planning, I think is going to be discussed later. I just went into ongoing professional development. So we're all working together to keep everybody healthy and safe. And so we did come up with a presentation so that teachers and staff know how to handle bloodborne pathogens and seizures, and also proper methods for putting on PPE and taking off PPE, to name a few. Jamie? Oh, Jamie, there you are.
Oh, okay, yeah, I'm on the
Yeah.
server. I was a fan
Good answer, Shane.
Yes, no, I'm here. So throughout the pandemic, the Illinois Department of Public Health has identified different scenarios in which the school would need to react if a student or a staff member either came into contact with someone that was COVID positive, demonstrated symptoms that were COVID positive, or tested positive for COVID-19. The information that is being shared with you now is as current as October 13th of this year, and is the 6th version of what is being referred to as the COVID-19 decision tree. The best case scenario for a situation with a student or staff member is that they come to school and report that they've had no symptoms during the screening, and they have a temperature under 100.4 degrees. But anticipating that that won't always be the case, there are other scenarios that take place. One of those scenarios is that what if a student or staff member comes to school and they report that they don't have any symptoms and they have a temperature that's under 104 degrees, but they share with a teacher or administrator or supervisor that they have come into close contact with somebody who has tested positive for COVID-19. In that circumstance, because the situation is so ambiguous, that student or staff member would be requested to stay home for 14 calendar days after the last exposure to the person with COVID-19. They would be allowed to participate in academic activities remotely. The staff member would be allowed to work remotely if they are able to do so. In this circumstance, we would maintain a log of the date that the staff or student would need to go home and remain in contact with the staff or student to check on their symptoms in anticipation of their return. The next situation that is going to become the most likely is what happens if a staff or student reports that they have one or more COVID-like symptoms. Those symptoms would be a new onset and unexplained. And how do we address that? So in that circumstance where we aren't sure what illness the staff or student has, but we are able to confirm that there is an illness, the staff or student would not be allowed to attend school. They would be required to stay home for at least 10 calendar days from the first date of the onset of the symptoms. And they could not return to school until they were 24 hours without a fever, without fever-reducing medication, and an improvement of those symptoms. Again, those staff or students would be allowed to work or learn remotely so long as they felt well enough to do so. If a student does not feel well enough to do so due to the illness, they would not be penalized for any missed work. In this circumstance, because we have an onset of COVID-like symptoms, if that student or staff member has a household member or a sibling that is also a member of the district, those members out of precaution would need to self-quarantine as well. As we work our way through the different scenarios, we have another situation where a staff or student may report that they have actually tested positive for COVID-19. In that circumstance, regardless of where they get tested, if a positive test is registered, the Lake County Department of Public Health is notified. We ask that the staff or student also notify the district. And in that circumstance, they would be precluded from attending school. They must stay home for 10 calendar days after testing positive for COVID. And if the symptoms emerge, then they have to stay home for 10 days from the date of the symptoms emerging, and they could return after the 10-day self-isolation with 24 hours of no fever, fever-reducing medication, and symptom improvement. Because Lake County Public Health Department will be notified, contact tracing will be conducted. That is why the emphasis on seating charts and who is in the building when is so important. And then we will follow the lead of the Lake County Health Department on this. The Lake County Health Department will also issue the COVID positive individual a letter stating that they have successfully completed their quarantine period and are eligible to return. If it is a situation that involves a student, the school nurses will take the lead on those cases. If it's a situation that involves an employee, the HR office at District 75 will take the lead. In this scenario, staff will be notified if a staff member, one of their colleagues, tests positive. And if a student tests positive and has been at school, parents and staff that have been determined to have been around that student will also be notified and instructed that they may be contacted by the Lake County Department of Public Health. There is one final scenario that can take place, is what happens if a student or staff member is exhibiting COVID-like symptoms, but they have an alternative diagnosis from their medical provider, such as allergies or bronchitis, and they do or they don't have a negative diagnostic test. In this case, we would be following pre-pandemic guidelines that if the illness that is not COVID limits the student or staff from participating in school activities or even remote activities, they would be excused, the student would be excused for the day and not penalized for any missed work. And the staff member would take a sick day as they would traditionally if they were ill. We have asked our staff and asked our families that if they have a student or if a staff member has a pre-existing medical condition such as seasonal allergies, a history of pink eye, there's a variety, to please have those notes on file with us so that we can use that in our analysis to determine if staff or students should be admitted to the building or would need to do those duties remotely. So I went through all that pretty quickly. I anticipate there will be questions, but I'll let Jamie get through her portion of the presentation before I step back in.
Okay. All right, thank you. I'm going to talk a little bit about the certification system for when students come to school. So as you may remember from last month, we talked about our students in our self-contained classes coming in, and there's a bus aid, and we have a paper copy with all the questions. And as we look at larger numbers of students coming into school, we wanted to examine ways to do this more swiftly, so that with the more students and with the staff and the room for just the best way to do this in the most efficient way. So what we have done is we've created blue cards that we're issuing to families, one for each student. And the blue card on one side is in English and one side in Spanish. And I believe the next slide will be able to show you a visual of those cards. Oh yeah, you have it in your packet. So basically what we're asking parents to do is the blue card is very symbolic that in the morning, they're looking at that blue card, confirming their child does not have any of the COVID symptoms listed. And at the bottom, it says any addition, any new symptoms in the event that things would shift a little bit in terms of symptoms, and that they are checking and ensuring that their student has a temperature below 100.4. And so by having their student take that card with them to the bus, each student will be provided a card and a lanyard. Or like with the little ones, the preschool is looking at having them wear kind of like a bus pass on their backpack, like a bus tag. So in whatever way makes the most sense for the student to be able to get to school, the parent would withhold the blue card if the student did have those symptoms or any of those symptoms, so the student would not be coming into the building. The children would then be able to board the bus with the blue card, and then upon arrival to school, we would have the accuracy of the blue card. And so if a student were to lose the blue card, we did order an abundance of extra blue cards that we would work with the families to redistribute if that was necessary. But using this symbolically, the parents will be provided with a letter, and they'll be provided with a Google Doc to essentially like write us back and give us their electronic signature that they understand the process so they can participate in it daily. And that is the blue card system.
Right now, if you had questions for follow-up stuff for Kathy, Shane, or Jamie.
So it says masks, but I'm not sure if I have the term correct, but are face shields acceptable?
You want to take that, Kathy? The question was, are face shields acceptable in place of a mask?
No, they can wear face shields with the masks. We have some teachers doing that. Are you referring to the children who can't?
So it's for both, either one.
Right.
Just clarification.
Yeah, so the Illinois Department of Public Health and ISB have both stated that face shields are not effective.
Okay. With regard to whether it be a student and or a staff member, whether it be symptoms and or a positive test, what happens to the other class members that were in that class with that student and or staff member?
That's a great question.
Okay, so you want me to take it?
Shane, did you hear that question?
I did. So if we have a student who tests positive for COVID-19, the Lake County Health Department will be involved in conducting the contact tracing. The way that the Lake County Department of Public Health has handled this situation so far is the class would be moved to another location so that that classroom could be cleaned 24 hours after the student was last in the class. And then that class would be, the parents would be notified that a student in that class has tested positive. Then through the contact tracing process, which is largely Lake County calling, and asking questions about how long were students around each other, were they wearing masks, what were they doing in the class, reviewing the seating chart. The Lake County will then determine what students in that proximity of the positive student would also need to self-quarantine out of a precaution.
Shane, real quick follow-up question. I'm just trying to figure out if you misspoke or if this really doesn't make any sense to me. When you first said, you said that if somebody were to have come in contact with somebody who had tested positive for COVID, they would need to quarantine for 14 days. But in the other two scenarios, either they're showing symptoms themselves or they have tested positive, they need to quarantine for 10 days.
Afters.
No, you have it correct that if you have come into close contact, and for contact tracing purposes, close contact is defined as less than 6 feet for more than 15 minutes. If you have come into close contact with someone who has tested positive for COVID, there's a 14-day period in which the individual is requested to quarantine. I understand that the close contact, why is the close contact 4 days longer than if you're exhibiting symptoms? The basis for that is that the way that testing has gone on and the research has gone on for now is individuals that begin to exhibit symptoms to exhibit it 4 to 5 days after exposure. So I believe that the Illinois Department of Public Health's guidance accounts for essentially an incubation period from the date of exposure to the date symptoms could possibly manifest or the date a positive test takes place.
Thank you.
And what about a staff member? What happens to the class that they were in?
Okay, so we are encouraging staff not to walk around the class as they traditionally would, because if a staff member does have COVID, that movement throughout the class could potentially expose additional students. But similar to a student situation, we would be interviewing the staff member to see if the staff member, because we'll know what classes they are and their physical location, but we'll interview that staff member to know, did that staff member speak with somebody in a mail room? Has that staff member always kept their mask on or not? Essentially try to trace their steps, and then based upon the information they either provide us or to Lake County, the Lake County Health Department, then we would work backwards to contact those individuals as well. It's not an automatic that if a student or a staff member were to test positive in a classroom, that entire classroom would need to quarantine. However, both the district and Lake County are being overly cautious with this, and it could happen. I don't want to lead people to believe it could automatically happen, but we are being incredibly prudent in this and recognizing that we have a remote learning opportunity or remote working opportunity available. That is a likely outcome.
Can I add something? I failed to mention another safety precaution that we do have is that the teachers have a plastic shield up in front of their desk. And in the self-contained classrooms, the kids actually have a shield as well. So we have extra above and beyond so that if one person would test positive, we would have that contained as much as possible.
I have two questions, Shane. My first question is, you mentioned the communication would be across the district as far as siblings or whatever, if somebody had come in close contact or there had been a positive, is there going to be communication between District 75 and 120 for siblings in the same regard?
Yes.
Okay. And then if, am I correct in understanding that we're not necessarily requiring tests to prove to come back? So we're relying upon the honor system to a degree, because Illinois Department of Public Health would not be involved unless there was a positive test, which then would indicate a test had been taken, correct?
Correct. So you're right that the way that the Department of Public Health has built this decision tree is to account for some people not having access to go get a test, or not feeling comfortable going to get a test. And so they've tried to put an alternative means in place that would allow a staff or student to return safely to work without going to get a test to confirm or negate a COVID diagnosis.
And I guess I do have a third question. So because we are relying on the blue cards as the self-certification, if a student was advised that they were in close contact with somebody that was positive, and then under our decision tree, we've told them they need to quarantine for 14 days, is somebody going to be keeping track of that in case they show up 4 days later with a blue card in hand?
I can answer it. I can't see visual cues from the other panelists. So the way that this would be handled is that if we do know that a student has been exposed and should not be in the building, the building administration would be made aware by the nurses of that person's status. And so we would hope that a student would not come to school if they were not eligible to do so. But during the screening process, we would have building administration be the one to ensure that that student was not granted access to the building.
Or a bus, I don't know.
Shane, one more question for you. So there's been situations in other school districts that have opened up that they've had students or staff test positive, and then they've turned around and closed and gone back to a remote learning model. You haven't mentioned any scenario in which that would happen, but do you foresee anything with the guidelines the way they currently are from Lake County and the state? Is there any scenario that you can think of where we would open up and then have to turn around and close again?
There is one. Obviously, our district and our peers are relying heavily on the mitigation efforts to prevent what would be considered a super spreader event inside a school building. It is possible. I do know, no one wants to use the word outbreak. I mean, there was a movie, by that name that was horrible, and when someone hears outbreak, they think, oh, if there's an outbreak at the school, then clearly they're going to need to shut down. But the way that outbreak is being defined right now by Lake County and by the Illinois Department of Public Health is 2 cases in the same building that can be traced to one another. So that's a little bit misleading. But I can tell you that the amount of effort and time that has gone into this planning, if we had a situation where we had a student or multiple students inadvertently create a situation where other students needed to quarantine, we would shift back to a remote learning model out of an abundance of caution rather than forge ahead if we didn't have certainty that our processes were working and assurances from the Lake County Department of Public Health that the contact tracing was evidencing that we were not in a super spreader type of environment.
So do we have like a threshold number as far as like number of cases where that would happen?
We don't, especially at 75, because we have different buildings. So, you know, each building essentially is going to be its own environment, and you know, there will be a minimal amount of staff that might travel from building to building, but I don't anticipate seeing an event at one school significantly impacting another, you know, in all the worst case scenarios that we're drawing up.
We also have to remember that the district does not control what happens outside of the classroom. Just because I happen to spend Friday night with 15 hockey team players all running around, not being socially distant, shall we say, in a different state. So, you know, and if they all, who knows, they all came back and they happen to be our students, we could have multiple occurrences and we wouldn't have anything to do with it.
Yep.
I had a quick follow-up for Ms. Kathy.
Yep.
Oh, so when you talked about the health training that the teachers were getting, I'm assuming that when you mentioned bloodborne pathogens, seizures, that's training that above and beyond what they normally get to be a teacher? Can you just clarify?
I'm not sure what they get normally as a teacher, but every year staff has to redo training.
Okay.
And so the nurses put together a presentation.
Well, I wasn't sure if you were doing something special above and beyond the norm, and then this is taking place in those 2.5 days, or is this just something that has already occurred? I'm just trying to.
Right, so what we did was, we did add COVID precautions because we had to change when students, for example, come to the nurse. And when they don't. And so we did add that PPE, which normally is not a big issue in our schools. We sent out, it's a PowerPoint presentation that they could do in their time. And then, for example, at Washington, we're having a staff meeting on November 9th, and I will be present to answer any questions that they have above and beyond that. And we also told them to reach out to us at any time if there was something that they didn't understand or wanted clarification on.
Thank you.
Kathy, will the self-certification system be used in place of doing temperature checks before the kids enter the building?
So that's, if you don't mind, I'll take that one. That's a great question. So right now, the certification system for our students in self-contained does include that an instructional aide, a staff member is doing the temperature check and collecting the self-certification information from the parent. So this is where the parent is certifying for us. What we're exploring as a district is once we get to the point that we're implementing this, more than likely, the parent is indicating that the child does not have a temperature of 100.4 or above, but more than likely also doing a temperature check system at the door before the students enter the building. So in addition, but not before they enter the bus.
Part of the problem has been with checking kids as the temperature gets colder outside. We're having a terrible time getting even a reading, and we're not even in November yet. So that's the problem with the non-touch thermometers, that they adjust according to the weather outside. So once they would be, in the building, we have tents set up outside each building as well, so that kids could get warmed up, get in the building, and we would check them again.
So 2.5 weeks, my granddaughter they haven't lost their blue card yet, but a different district.
They have not lost it?
No, on a lanyard.
Woo! That's good to know.
I think Freddie has a question online too.
Oh.
I did. Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Awesome. So I appreciate all the information, and I know we've gone through this a couple times, but I did have a question. And Kathy, I believe you mentioned it, and it's one of the notes I had going into this meeting, and I don't know if it's possible, but air purifiers. The more and more we read up on these, on this virus, and me kind of having a little bit more closer insight, being that I'm in the cleaning industry and I'm a little closer to it. Air purifiers seem to kind of be the, I don't want to say the norm, but the new hot topic. Is that something we've looked at in for the as a district to see if that's something we can get, not just to isolate individuals, but maybe in every classroom, or improving our airflow? And I don't know if Dave's in the room or not, but I know that can help. I know opening windows can help, but cold weather's right around the corner, if not already here. But our air purifier is something we can look at on a larger scale for all of our classrooms, because turning over that air and ensuring that there is clean air every 2, 3, 4 minutes in that room, I think would help the situation, and obviously just give a little bit more peace of mind, aside from just wearing masks and having social distancing, considering this is a very contagious airborne virus. So that's just what I wanted to add. I don't know who the question would be for, but if it's just something we can kind of look into. Thank
So
you.
we have been exploring that information, Freddie, and we, with guidance, with working with the health department, one of the pieces was to look at definitely in your nurse's sick area to have a separate air purifier was a recommendation. So we have provided those in the different nurse sick areas. As far as the classroom, and I can't do it justice like Dave, however, we can respond to you later because we have this in our FAQs for our, from our special ed self-contained meetings. What we learned is that we have the ventilation system, or the air quality filters are being changed with more regularity than normal, and starting as early as, I believe it was the sometime in August. And so just the air quality has been tested, and then the filter system has been updated and is on a different cycle or sequence than normal to clean it out more regularly. So, and I'm sure we can get you an even more extensive response from Dave later, but.
So Dave
About
has
the,
coming in, but they're-
Yeah, you said that there's an inspection service coming in, whatever company it was. Because I asked about getting the ventilation system checked. I asked Kevin, like, when was the last time that we did that?
So to go along with your question, Freddie, Dave's Aroma is having a third-party provider come in to look at our ventilation systems. They're doing exactly what Jamie had mentioned, looking at the filters. They're also looking at the turnover rate for fresh air coming into the room. So we do have that in process.
Thank you.
Are there other questions? This is my favorite topic, quality education. So if you go to the next slide. We're lucky we're gonna be sharing some of the logistics at each of the buildings, but most importantly, talking about some of the things that we can do at each of our buildings that we can't do as well online. And we really, that's a question we've been asking ourselves throughout the process of this. And so just like before, when we talk about quality education, these are some of the things that we focus on, and all of these are being taken into account as we do our planning. And so we want to welcome representatives from each of our schools, and we're going to start with Ms. Bennett and Brianna Banks, one of our preschool teachers, to talk about the logistics at Lincoln.
So I am Brianna Banks. I am one of the preschool teachers over at Lincoln in the Jumpstart program.
Which she wants to go next.
Next slide, please.
Next one.
On this
one. Oh, okay.
Next two.
Hang on, next slide.
Next one, please.
There we go.
Thank you. Okay, so right now we have our early childhood classes. They are coming in the morning daily. And then in the afternoon, the teachers are teaching the PM classes remotely. For the hybrid program, for the Jumpstart classes, the students would still be coming in the AM and in the PM. And we would have the students coming 2 days a week. We would just split the students by last name. So we would split them A through K and L through Z. And that would be for the AM and the PM classes. We would have the group 1 come on Mondays and Thursdays, and group 2 come on Tuesdays and Fridays. The other days they would be at home learning remotely. And on Wednesdays, all students would be learning remotely. For the students that choose remote, they would be learning remotely 5 days a week. We would have, our lessons would occur simultaneously for remote and in-person students during our large group and our small groups. We would still be pushing out activities for our independent playtime for the students that are at home each day. In between classes, so in between our AM and our PM sessions, we would have the classrooms deep clean, so like all the toys that we played with during the day and all the surfaces, like all the tables and all the desks, they would be cleaned as well. And then again at night, so that way the class is ready for the AM. And we would be switching back to our normal start time of 8 AM for the AM class, and PM we would start at 12:15.
Good evening, I'm Carol Bennett. I'm the principal over at Lincoln. Next slide, Anna. Thank you. So some of the things that we are excited about happening when students come back that we're able to do in person that we can't do remotely is our teachers and our therapists actually get to check for understanding with the littles. It's sometimes hard because they're in and out of the screen a lot as they move around at home. So they're able to watch their face and interact with them and observe them, especially while they're playing and doing those gross motor activities. We get a lot of information when we do those activities, and not being able to see as much of those online is a hindrance for us, but we do have some activities being pushed out that parents are sending us information on. And another thing that teachers and therapists can do is reteach things immediately when they see things going in a different direction. They can reteach it right there as they make that error and correct it again. And then students have that time to socialize with other students. That's really important, even starting at the age of 3, is being able to watch others and how they're modeling it and learning how to interact with other students, especially in learning how to be a student at school, even though it will be different. Our littles every day are getting off the bus and going up and checking in. I help check them in every morning, and just seeing their little faces every morning greeting me for the past couple weeks has just made my day. So he just can't help himself with that 6 foot. He just has to grab my hand every morning, and I'm like, okay, then we probably go wash our hands. So, I like that anyways. So, and then it also allows them to have immediate access to educational materials and help, and to get that face-to-face relationship going with a teacher, and to build that stamina for learning. So that's just a little bit about Lincoln. And then I think
So next we're going to have Jill and Emily talk about Washington's learning environment.
Hi everyone, I'm Jill Unger. I'm the assistant principal at Washington and Mechanics Grove, but tonight I'm going to give an overview of what our hybrid plan looks like at Washington. So our instructional day is from 8:30 to 3:30. Students will be grouped into groups A and B, primarily based on the first letter of their last name. Exceptions can be made based on instructional need and specific student needs. Group A will attend in person on Monday and Thursday from 8:30 to 11:30. Group B will attend on Tuesday and Friday. The focus of instruction is on literacy and math. Group A will work remotely Tuesday and Friday from 8:30 to 11:30. Group B on Monday and Thursday. The focus of instruction on specials, intervention, and independent work. On Wednesday, both groups will be remote with a focus on literacy and math. Our PM block will run from 1 o'clock to 3:30. All students will be remote, and groups A and B will be back together. The focus of instruction is on social emotional learning, foundational skills, small group instruction, and specials. Our two-way immersion students will have, this schedule is the morning portion of what our two-way immersion students have. They have half of their in-person in English and Spanish, and the afternoons will focus on similar content in English and Spanish. Hi, I'm Emily Putz. I'm a teacher at Washington, and to build off what Ms. Unger was talking about, that some of the highlights for Washington that we have are that students, even though they're getting split up into different groups of A and B, and also families that choose complete remote, they're going to be able to reunite with their whole class in the afternoons and on Wednesdays when everyone is remote. And we will continue with Eagle Hour in the afternoon so that those three groups can reconvene and set the tone and recap from what happened in the morning. And specials are still going to happen remotely. Specials will still happen remotely for all children. And we're going to be able to have small group instruction for foundational skills and then other remote small group instructional opportunities. It'll be nice for the teachers, as mentioned at Lincoln, that they'll be able to have time to give immediate access to materials. They get some stuff in the remote setting, but they can more easily adapt and give students what they need. They'll be able to integrate more with each other, having impromptu discussions at 6-foot distance, and also work with other groups of students, building their relationships personally, but as well as academically. And it says again down there that we will be split A through K for group A and L through Z for group B. Next slide, please. And some of the other things that we can do once students are in person that are more difficult to do remotely is that we can do more observations of how students are writing, correct any reversals, or just be able to see their writing live. Be able to reteach and respond to the students' needs without technical difficulties with the sounds that can happen over the computer. More observations can be done for math, watching how they use their fingers or talking about their strategies that they're using and meet those students' needs. Also being able to more focus their attention on tasks. It can be distracting to be at home with all the other stuff going on. So teachers can coach the students on how to attend to the learning and also build stamina for the learning in the controlled setting.
Thank you. Okay, well, I am Tanya Fergus. I'm the principal at Mechanics Grove School. I'm smiling under here, I promise. I hate these for that reason. I'd like to thank Jill Unger for actually going through most of the schedule already, as Mechanics Grove's schedule will look very similar, except for a few tweaks here. So the first thing I'd like to point out is due to the needs for transportation and making sure that we can get all the students to their schools at the right times, Mechanics Grove times will switch. So as you can see here, the buses would arrive at 7:45, and as you see on the top, it does say that the AM block would start at 7:45. So the bus would arrive around 7:30, excuse me, and the AM block would start at 7:45. So our AM block would be 7:45 to 10:45. We would do that middle of the day block from 10:45 to 12:30. And then our PM would be 12:30 to 2:30. So just making sure everyone sees that difference. We also will have our groups A and B split up primarily by alphabetical order, just like the other schools. And our Wednesdays, as you can see, just like the other schools as well, would be full remote day. So the color that's yellow on there, or beige, is the time when students would for sure be with their homeroom classes and with their homeroom teacher or teachers, depending on if it's TWE or not. Then the morning, the in-person, you can see the focus is literacy and math. We have our specials during the on-demand times and our remote times, and then we're also focusing on our social emotional Wolfpack time in the afternoons. Next slide, please. This is an example, just like Mrs. Unger went over as well, of our TWE day or one-way immersion as well for our 5th grade. And their mornings would be half of the time in Spanish and half of the time with English instruction. Their on-demand days when they're not in school, but it's their mornings also, they would have on-demand activities assigned by both teachers as well, Spanish and English. And then their afternoon, they would alternate which days they're with either their teacher of Spanish instruction or their teacher of English instruction, other than their Wednesday remote day. There we put about the alphabet as well, and specials will be throughout the week for students as it is now. And now some of the teachers are going to help explain.
So some of the, oh, sorry, I'm Rita Washburn from Mechanics Grove. Some of the highlights from our schedule at MG As Mrs. Fergus mentioned, the students will be together with their current homerooms all day on Wednesdays and every afternoon. So all those relationships they've built, they will continue to have ongoing. While the students are in person, we will be focusing on the core instructions, math and literacy. And they will still get all their specials each week. Currently, they have 4 different days they have specials. They'll be split 2 and 2 on the days that they're learning remotely. And we'll kind of group them together with the students who are remaining remote. And then the final thing is that during the remote time in the afternoon, we'll have our wolf pack time is when we focus on social emotional learning as well as leader and me learning, and then other classroom relationship activities.
I'm Jackie Ewing, 5th grade teacher at Mechanics Grove. Another highlight from hybrid would be that students who attend in person will have immediate access to materials. Even though our materials pickups have been very successful, it'll be much easier to give them on demand when students are in the classroom. There will be more impromptu student-to-student interaction in the classroom. Even though it's working well, it's sometimes difficult when we have to ask students to unmute. We can't have that spontaneous discussion like we're able to in person. And then some things that we can do in person that we can't do remotely at Mechanics Grove is making sure that we can give students books immediately when we need them. So we do a lot of observational assessments when we're doing reading and writing conferences. So being able to give the students the just right books right at that time when we have those teachable moments is very crucial for when we're doing in-person learning. And then finally, we are able to check for understanding and teach those skills without the technical difficulties, because sometimes a student can get kicked off the Zoom, and so it will be much easier in person to be able to address the needs right when they're happening. Oh, if you could go back a slide. Sorry, Ms. Berger.
Thank you. Hola, me llamo Señora Rodriguero, 5th grade dual language at Mechanics Grove. So to continue on with what Jackie was saying, watching students solve math problems in real time supports teachers' understanding of their student learning. So as much as we can encourage students to ask questions or send us a private chat with a question they have, very similar to adults, it's not easy to ask for help. And so when we're in person as teachers, it allows us to recognize that nonverbal communication. And that nonverbal communication represents like 78% of communication that we have. And so when we are in person, as students are working independently, the teacher can quickly assess student progress by walking around the room, glancing over a child's shoulder, rather than having to go one by one individual screen, asking students to kind of hold up their work and attempt to try to make out what you can read from the notebook on the screen. So as students are working independently, the teacher can quickly assess a child's progress, and it can help with, through the computer, having to understand or try to figure out a student's handwriting, or as they're moving their notebook, as we're trying to gauge what they were able to do. In-person teachers can immediately identify where a child is getting stuck with that specific skill, and we can respond in that time. They can also tell a student's facial expressions or ability to start, whether that child may need something explained in a different way, or in case they need additional support. And this is just not possible for students remotely who choose to have their camera off, which is their right, but we can't engage their facial expressions to tell us whether or not they're stuck or they're feeling lost or they're not able to get started. So teachers can quickly see if they need to stop and reteach a concept, whether it's to the whole class, whether they need to pull a small group, or whether they have a subsection of students that are ready to extend the lesson and that we can offer extension opportunities to. We can also build organizational techniques that will transfer between remote and in-person instructions. So one of the most challenging aspects can be keeping everything organized, all your supplies, and that's true whether we're in person or not. But in the virtual setting, students are now not only on top of their supplies, they're being asked to keep their schedules organized, their materials organized, their days, learning times, which is a lot. In person, we'll be able to ensure that students are going home organized and ready to learn in the remote learning or on-demand planning days, helping to make sure they know where all those materials are, helping them to set up a schedule that'll work best for them. And then finally, teaching students skills for redirecting their attention in distracting settings or long learning sessions, as well as building stamina for learning time in a controlled setting. So as we work with students independently during our in-person time, we'll be able to work with students more one-on-one or in whole group or small group to create these strategies and action plans for managing and monitoring their work stamina and helping them to handle distracting situations outside the school building. So when they are in their home learning environment, wherever that may be. We can identify and set time limits and breaks for them so that when they're at home, they know I can work for X amount of minutes, and then the best course of action for me is to take a break. And they can also see in person when a child is beginning to lose focus and why that might be and respond to that. And then finally, they can help students identify their ideal and preferred learning environment. So perhaps maybe a child's current learning environment isn't working what's best for them. And so we can have that conversation with the student and help them come up with a plan as to where they can create a new learning environment at their home or their daycare or wherever their on-demand learning center might be.
Next slide.
Hi, my name is Ashley Buckman and I am a math teacher at Carl Sandburg. I'm going to explain the middle school schedule and how we developed this plan. We started by looking at what other districts were already doing in a hybrid plan or planning to do in their hybrid schedules. We used this information to develop a schedule that would work best for us and for our students. One of the top priorities that we were looking at was safety. As we looked at the logistics and the physical space in our buildings, we decided that a half-day option without lunch in the building was the best. Our other goals were to see every class every day and to build a schedule that minimizes the need to change schedules for students and for teachers. Our goal was to be able to have as few schedule changes as possible, regardless of which option the families chose, whether they chose a hybrid option or a remote option. So as you can see, the schedule that we created has students in the building Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday, Thursday, and Friday mornings. Students are broken into 3 groups. For the families that choose hybrid, they'll be in either group A or group B based by their last name alphabetically. And we're following the same, as you've heard the other schools are doing. A through K is like group A, and L through Z would be group B. Monday morning, and then group C would be the kids that are choosing the fully remote option. So group A would be coming in person on Monday for periods 1 through 4, while group B and C would also be in their 1st through 4th period classes, but they would all be remote. On Tuesday, group B would be in person for periods 1 through 4, while groups A and C would be remote. On Thursday and Friday, we then switch to the afternoon classes so that we can see the afternoon kids in person as well. So Thursday morning, group A would be in person for periods 5 through 9 in the morning, while the other groups are remote. And on Friday, group B would be in person for periods 5 through 9 in the morning, while the rest of the kids are remote. Wednesdays is our fully remote day for everybody. And then the afternoons are also fully remote for everybody. As you can see, we are also switching back to our more normal start times of 7:45 to 10:40 would be like our morning block. And then the afternoon block is from 12 to 2:55, which allows for time for lunch, transportation, cleaning, and all of those things. If you could go to the next slide, please.
this shows what the schedule looks like for Group C. They are remote all the time, but they would still be attending classes with their peers in their current classes. You can go to the next one. I like this schedule a lot. This is the one I plan to print out and have at my desk because it shows, again, the time periods and when each period is occurring during the day. Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, it's periods 1 through 9 in that order. On Thursday and Friday, that's where we're switching and we're having the afternoon classes in the morning. So periods 5 through 9 would be first so that we can see those groups in person. And then we would still have periods 1 through 4 in the afternoon. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Seco.
Good evening, I'm Nick Seco, I'm a teacher at Sandburn. And as Ashley pointed out, when we got together as a building to talk about what we wanted the Sandburn model to look like, we came up with 3 must-haves kind of to build our plan around. And those were, as she mentioned, we wanted to see every student every day. We wanted to keep the pacing the same for these students. So that would be presenting the same lesson to every student every day or something similar, trying to keep the pacing the same for the students in the class. And then we also, a goal of ours would be to try to keep the current, the current teachers with the current students. So we were trying to minimize moving students away from the teachers they currently have. So with those as our primary goals, you can see those that's touched on the first 2 bullet points of this slide. And to give you an idea of what that might look like in a class, I can give you an example. So how I could see this working is teachers log in, or the students log in, everybody logs in, attendance is taken with at the same time where everybody's the teacher would then frame the lesson, we say, where they would present the relevant sites, the objectives, maybe criteria for success, so that everybody's on the same page knowing what the lesson is for the day and what they should be getting out of it. And then if there's that would also provide the teacher an opportunity to model any type of activity that might be occurring that day. Then we would break down into small groups, and this would give the teacher then the opportunity to work with those those students who are present, while the ones remotely could be working on the same activity at the same time. Then maybe down towards the end of the class period, the teacher would come back, maybe clarify any questions, clarify the homework or the expectations for that night, and then dismiss as a group. So.
Yeah, I think that's all I got. I think you took everything I had to say. So my name is Mark Pilot. I'm the principal at Carl Sandburg Middle School. As you can see, the middle school model is slightly different than the elementary school model. We are teaching remote and in person at the same time. This is a decision that the staff made, which Mr. Seco went over with. I think part of the balance that we want to strike is that our kids will have availability to the staff. The benefits that are provided through in-person instruction, Mr. Sand and Mrs. Hurt are going to go over momentarily. But I think what I want to stress is that we've already started doing some staff PD. We actually had some training start today. We talked about different models. We didn't create these on our own. These are things that we have stolen from other districts. We are not the first into the fray on this remote learning challenge. So we have watched what some other districts have done, talked to them. Those were in the responses to one of the questions that a board member asked. We've talked to Barrington, Naperville, Fremont, Grays Lake. I can't even remember. There's 5 or 6 of them that we've actually corresponded with to make sure that what we are thinking can be done. We've worked with the technology department to make sure the tech will work. Part of the remote learning planning days that are going to be discussed a little bit later is specifically for the staff to come in and get the setup of the room so that they can make sure they know, how do you sit in when you're dealing with kids on the computer and you're dealing with kids in person. you know, as Mr. Seco said, you're gonna have that small group opportunity, but you're just gonna have to make sure that you have set the period in, or you set the activity in place to be done while you're working and focusing on that group. So the whole goal of this model is to provide contact with the teacher. And then I'm gonna turn it over to Mr. Sand and Mrs. Hurt, and they are gonna talk about the benefits of getting the kids back in the building.
Hello, my name's Jamie Hurt. I'm an 8th grade teacher. And if you know Sandberg, if you know Mr. Pilot and Mr. Sand, we're all about the code. So if you could go back to that slide, I'd appreciate it.
Back.
To the code. There you go, thank you. Community, as was mentioned a couple of times, our kids need the social engagement that you can get in person. And honestly, so does the staff. We miss being there with the kids. We miss seeing them at work. We miss seeing what works for them, what doesn't work for them. And it's just a little harder to do remotely. Oh, for ownership. You know, teachers can better support the executive functioning. It just does not come naturally to a lot of our students. And if we're there in person, that's something that, you know, we're better able to support. And the mindset is different. I'm sure some of you have seen, you know, it's just different working from home. E-learning from your bed isn't quite the same as learning directly in the classroom. It's really hard sometimes to make that separation. So with the students that we have brought in for a little extra help, we've seen just a big difference in their engagement, in their attitude, just in general. They do better when they've been with us. Mr. Sand?
All right, let's start off. I'll take the D and the E here. For the code, for the D is discovery. The first one there, other people have talked about this too, but having those hands-on activities, as we all know, a lot of kids learn best in doing that way. And with remote learning, we've been able to do some material pickup, which is a lot for some hands-on, but having kids in the class is going to offer much more opportunities to do that. The second part is, and this was mentioned before as well, was just that nonverbal feedback that we get from kids. We're giving them new material and they don't understand it. We can use their body language, the look on their face to know they don't understand it. We need to give them a little more help because we can see them in person. The cameras aren't always on, the lighting isn't always great, the camera's always facing the kids, so having them in person is going to be a big help there. For effort, we have just the ability to have that proximity to your teacher, as it mentions on there, discreetly get help. You can raise your hand, just easier to get the teacher's attention to let them know that you need a little extra help. And then the last part, hopefully by this point in remote learning, about a month and a half in, every kid has found a spot in their house where they know when they go there, it's time to learn. That's even more so when they walk through the doors of Carl Sandburg. When they walk through, distractions are a little bit limited. There's no more dogs, no more cats, no more other siblings that are making too much noise. When they walk through the door, they know it's time to learn and time to live the code. So, it's Carl Sandburg.
So you've heard a lot of information. We're going to take a pause just for some questions from the board. Just to clarify a couple of things that I was reading online. Specials for the two-way immersion students are going to be in K-5. Will be for the hybrid students will be on the remote side of the day. So on the remote part of the morning. So that was that. I clarified with Mr. McCreary about the walking around the room because that seemed to be one of the questions that was happening over online. It's encouraged not to walk around the room, but not required. What's really important is what he had said about being within 6 feet for more than 15 minutes. That's what is close contact. So, and then that goes along with some of the pieces for small group instruction. In K-5, we push the direct instruction up to the front of the day so that we wouldn't have to worry about the small group instruction in the classroom. So a lot of the small group instruction will happen remotely with the students, you know, the reading groups and those kinds of small group math and all those kinds of things. And then so that, I'll just take some questions from the board. Kurt.
All right. My biggest concerns I'm listening to this is at the middle school level. The way that it's kind of described, where you're going to have at any one time, you're going to have your remote kid, your fully remote kids, and then you're going to have whatever one of your groups, and then you're going to have a handful of kids that are in person. So you might have 20 kids that are remote, and then you might have like 7 or 8 kids that are in person. So you go through your lesson, you introduce what you're doing, you go through your objectives, you do some modeling for all the kids. My concern is that once you get started and the kids are doing activities, the attention's going to get focused on all the kids in the room. And we're kind of talking about walking around the room. You could easily get caught up 10, 15 minutes with these kids in the room. And then these kids are over here, what if they need help? That's my biggest concern. So like the kids who choose remote fully, I have a concern that their level of education is going to be decreased significantly.
I'm gonna let Mr. Pilot answer
So
part of
that's,
that.
the concurrent teaching model is not the easiest thing to pull off. And it's not gonna look anywhere, I mean, because you have these kids over here. So what people might be expecting the in-person to look like might not be as good as what they may think it is. And also on the flip side of that, the kids that are over here remote, if focuses attention over here, that's a tough balancing act.
Yeah,
I mean, I don't want these kids to be sitting here with questions for 10 or 15 minutes and completely lost.
I'm gonna let Mr. Pilot take
And
that.
I think we've experienced that in the remote setting where we've had kids stuck in waiting rooms and, you know, for the exact reasons you say, we're going on something else and we don't notice that. So I think we have to be diligent in any model that we're putting forth right now, just because it's different for everyone. But I do think that what the staff is striving for in this is to avoid what you're talking about. And so it's going to take some attention and some professional development and just training our minds before we actually start to do it. So for example, one of the models that we looked at was kind of the station model, of working with time and how are we going to break out into those small groups. And the time may not be the time within that period. It may be spread out over a couple of days. So one of the staff was suggesting maybe what they do is what Mr. Seco and you just described is that general classroom lesson, do some of the practice, but the focus is with in-person kids, not to the complete lack of the other students, but that's the focus for the A through L, then the M through Z, and then the remote day is the focus to ensure that we are reaching and providing feedback. That's one example that, you know, over a longer stretch of time. There are also other examples that they've come up with, you know, in the rotation, depending on how we want to flip the class, whether we go to a personalized style learning model where there's a like choice list of activities and then the staff frees up and starts pulling kids into the room. So I don't think anybody is thinking this is going to be easy. I don't think any of this has been easy. But you know, it's where we're at right now and what we think we can do.
Can I add to what Mr. Pilot was saying? A lot of the professional development, and it's not even just this year, I would say since I've been here, so about the last 6 or 7 years, at the middle school has been focused on small group instruction. And in our small group instruction professional development, so we've sort of been gearing up for this for 6 years, right? In that small group instruction, it always starts with a mini lesson. So something that is access to everybody, and then you break into your independent work and small group instruction. So I think what Mr. Pilot is describing is sort of that in action, that we're going to make sure that the mini lesson is accessible to everybody, whether it's in person or remote. And then we're going to break into our small groups and independent work. Some of that small group independent work will have to happen independently outside of the classroom at home with the students. Some of that will be small group instruction in the classroom, and some of it at times will be small group instruction in a breakout room sort of on Zoom. So that's sort of the structure that he's using to ensure that all of the students have access to quality education. So that's both the large group and the small group instruction. I think what's been unique about the work that the Sandberg staff has been doing, Mr. Pilot talks about the remote students being group C, so they were never left out of the equation. So you see in all of the schedules, there's a group A, B, and C. Those are your remote students, and they're gonna get specialized attention. And also they're reading a lot of articles and they're using those articles. And I think you sort of make mention to the pitfalls of concurrent education. They're taking those pitfalls and they're saying, how do we provide support around those? And so they're really structuring their professional learning around getting around some of those pitfalls. So they're kind of flipping the script on some of those articles.
Well, at least we're gonna try to. I mean,
They will.
we understand the concerns that you're expressing, and I don't know, I think the other thing that I would say is while we wanna see the kids in school, yeah, it's probably gonna look different than what's in our head.
Yeah.
I don't disagree with that either.
Yeah, I you know, because I'm a teacher and I know that that's one of the big things that, you know, we're concerned with this. And, you know, I just want to make it clear to everybody that like, these are going to be some of the things like in the classroom that are going to be like major challenges for teachers.
Yep.
And it's going to be a work in progress and it's not going to be easy.
Yeah.
Thank you. Christy?
So the presentation and the slides did a pretty good job of explaining what the plan is for the 100% remote kids at the middle school level, but none of the information really did a lot to give us any answers for really what's going to be happening with the 100% remote kids on those mornings. Is it all going to be I understand some of it is specials, because I understand, I heard that the specials are going to be grouped with the kids who are remote, so there's some of that. But are those 100% remote kids going to have access to teachers for live instruction? It's not going to be 4 mornings of asynchronous, correct?
And I'm going to turn it over to Tanya, but really the plan is to have, for the mornings, a group of teachers that are in-person teachers and a group of teachers that are remote teachers for the morning. And then Tanya, can you explain sort of the rest of that?
Yeah, that was exactly
Oh,
what
sorry.
That's what I was going to say. That was what I was going to say, is just that, that will be the situation. So it'll be just like they're experiencing now, it just might not be their homeroom teacher. We're gonna do the best we can, at least K through 5, grade K through 5, to make sure that they have their homeroom teacher if possible in the mornings, but we may have to actually delineate it out to actual teachers of remote instruction versus teachers of hybrid and in-person instruction.
And so even in that situation, if you had a different teacher for the 4 mornings, because you're 100% remote, you are still going to the best of our ability, going to have access to the same current homeroom teacher the 4 afternoons and the all-day Wednesday, correct?
So if you have Mrs. Smith for your morning remote teacher,
Right now.
Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, still on all-day Wednesday and your afternoons, you will be with your homeroom class of peers, as well as your homeroom teacher or teachers if it's tweaked.
And I think that's important for parents to understand, because even if there is a teacher change, it's not an entire moving you out, creating a whole new class for you. It might just be for some of that instruction, but some of that time, 4 mornings a week, is going to be taken up, at least 2 mornings, with some specials and things like that.
Correct.
So it's kind of like adding in another resource teacher for some of those lessons.
And the most important
That's a
part
great
of
way to think of it.
the most important part of all of this will be the collaboration that happens. And so I know at Washington and MG specifically, have already designated that no matter what, Wednesdays during that lunch break time, there will not be any meetings scheduled, because the grade level will be required to meet to plan the next week, to make sure they are all on the same schedule, because you may be having some interchanging between teachers.
Okay. And I just think that's important for parents to understand too.
Absolutely.
Because I know there's a lot of people who that was one of their biggest concerns, and nothing had really addressed that, and I appreciate the answer.
No problem. And I think what Ms. Fergus highlights also, and we'll get to it when we talk about calendar changes, the amount of collaboration to pull this off is going to be huge, and which is why we need to provide some supports for our teachers to do so. Other questions? I think, Kevin, did you have a question or no?
No.
Okay.
Only one real easy one, I think.
I like easy ones.
There you go. So lunch, not in the building, but is it going to be provided by D75?
Jamie, do you want to take that?
couldn't hear the question.
It was the question.
Lunch is not going to be in the building, but there'll be lunch provided for students to take with them, or
Sure.
none?
So when we're in a hybrid situation with more students, We will still have lunches out in the community because some of our students are going to maintain 100% full remote.
Yeah.
So we'll still have the lunches, the breakfast and lunches served out in the community. However, our intent is to drop down, instead of doing that 4 days a week, do it 2 days a week, but make sure they get 5 days a week worth of meals across those 2 days a week. So that will take it, so for a student that might come into the building just certain days, they could have access to either picking up at the community staff, or they could also get at school, because the addition that we will add is we'll have grab and go at each of the buildings as well. So there'll be the grab and go opportunity on the way out, as well as still serving in the community, but more than likely we will have less stops than we're anticipating, and then we're doing it 2 days a week instead of 4.
Go ahead, Lisa. Yeah, sorry.
I was just curious, obviously you guys have spent so much time and effort coming to this place. I was just curious if you could shed some light on some of the barriers or things you had to work around, for example, to not
Sure.
go with a full day, 2 days a week.
Sure.
So what did you find were the biggest kind of constraints? Was it space? Was it, what other factors kind of led to you saying the 2 days hybrid in school is the best, half days is best?
Yeah, so I think our initial pass through it was instructionally, right? We want to be able to provide small group instruction for our students because that's where we get the biggest bang for our buck. And so how do we do that in an era of COVID where you can't be in close proximity with a group of students for a prolonged period of time? So one of the first things we did was move that small group instruction at the K-5 online, because there you can have a group of 6 kids working together with a teacher in a very different way. The other things we looked at are what parts of our curricula are available to us in a remote setting. We had implemented Orton Gillingham this year. A lot of the instruction was done by a trainer who does Orton Gillingham remotely for a living. And so we have that access for that at K2. Our science curriculum also available as a 100% online resource. So we have those things that we knew we could push to the afternoon. I know there were some questions about why we aren't doing like a Monday, Tuesday, and a Thursday, Friday. We really wanted to make sure that students were meeting with teachers regularly. And when we looked at a schedule that had a Monday, Tuesday, and a Thursday, Friday, there were 5 days where students weren't in person in a row. And so as a team, we sort of looked at some of those pieces. I'm gonna ask kind of my minions out there, right? Help me, what are some of the other things that sort of were barriers for us that we ended up in this schedule?
I think part of it was with Wednesday being our full remote day where we're all together, that if we saw both groups of students, if we saw one group of students on Monday, Tuesday, and the next group we weren't seeing until Wednesday or Thursday, the way our Wednesday would go would be very difficult because half of the students would have learned one thing and the other half wouldn't have learned it yet. And so it would have been very difficult to plan lessons for the students that would meet their needs.
And I think go ahead, Ashley.
I was gonna add, one of the biggest barriers that we saw was lunch, and that was district-wide. There was concerns at the elementary buildings of even if they had lunch in their classroom, masks would then be off, and it was a big safety concern. And I know at Sandburg, we originally had come up with a plan that we got super excited about. We thought we could do mornings and a different group in the afternoons, and as we looked at the logistics, we realized we needed to kind of slow down and we needed to make sure we were doing things well and doing things safely. But ultimately, we all want to get back to more in-person instruction, but we knew we needed to take a safe approach.
I think what Ashley says there is really important to understand. What we're presenting is the starting point, right? And we'll talk about this will be a fluid plan. As we get better at it, we want to add more time with our students. We may be able to figure out lunch and all of those pieces. We may be able to do, I know T's gonna hate me for saying this, a morning and an afternoon. We don't know, but we wanted to get something off the ground. She's giving me the evil eye.
I think it's important to say the why. Tia might be giving you the evil eye because it's something we've talked about, but not everybody has had the opportunity of listening to. So one of the reasons why that option was almost immediately taken off the board was the fact that it would insanely increase our transportation costs to make it cost prohibitive right now.
And the Wednesday full remote day is a cost savings that we'll be able to use later. So more to come.
It's also a deep cleaning day.
I'm sorry, what did you say,
It's
Carol?
also a deep cleaning day, so we really want
Yes.
it the middle of the week to be clean.
So I think I understand why AM, PM is problematic. But somebody describe for me, what's the length that a student is on a bus in the morning and the afternoon, approximately?
I'll be addressing that at the transportation slide, but the maximum route length we've given them is 45 minutes.
Okay,
Now
so
that's
2
fully
times
loaded.
45
But wait.
is the amount of time they're on transportation.
But not yet, because we've given that 45 minutes to fully fill the bus with 50 kids.
Yes.
We are looking right now at about 50% of the kids staying remote and not actually coming, so that brings your route times down significantly, because you don't have to stop at every stop. So there'll be about, we're looking at 25 kids. So although it says a maximum of 45, we're anticipating it to be more like 25 to 30 minutes.
And my question was actually a compound on that. At the K through 5 level, there's still quite a long midday lunch recess / break. I know at the middle school level, because of the passing periods and the need to deal with that, it's not as long of a break. So I imagine that depending on transportation issues, some of those afternoon sessions might have to be a little bit flexible if those kids need to have lunch while getting onto that first class, because that may not be allowed.
And the beauty of remote is that we can always push back after lunch if everybody's remote, if we need to.
Right.
Other questions before we jump into some of the other logistics? Okay, so we're going to talk about special ed and transportation and calendar coming up. So I'm going to turn it over to Jamie to talk a little bit about our student services.
Can I ask one more question that I thought of
Sure.
before we go on to that, just because it stays with the teaching and learning? At the, am I correct that right now we don't have any 5th grade band, correct?
Correct.
Not this year. So band is only an issue right now at the middle school level. So that is a class, and we are still doing that in person for those that are coming in person, correct?
Are you asking the middle school?
Yes.
Yes.
Mark?
Yes, we have actually started to try to work with that, like that's one of the places. When Freddie was asking about air filters, we actually have 2 air filters in the band room as part of the safety precautions that we're going through, and that's what we're running. We're running the kids through. We have other areas in the building designated. We didn't know what kind of size we were gonna get in terms of kids coming in. So we have other areas designated for band as well, to keep the group small so we can manage it. Otherwise, it would probably just be like a music reading. There would be limited play. Just because we wouldn't have the correct spacing for the instrument.
And I know, only because I've seen the presentation that Mrs. Gupta has put together, and they're doing, special masks that they can keep on and still play with their mouthpieces. They've got bell covers that go on. They've got plexiglass things that go around them. There's distancing. However, if a family feels comfortable enough to send the kids to the hybrid model when it opens, and they are in bands, if they're not comfortable having them participate in band, is that going to be an option to have
Yeah, we
them
can
continue
accommodate
staying
them.
remote for that? Because I've heard some families
Yes,
ask that.
I mean, yeah, the band department will work with you in whatever way you want, and if it's, if they're coming to school on, on the afternoon days when band runs, there would be an accommodation made for the student to attend somewhere else in one of our larger areas.
Thank you.
Thank you. Jamie?
On the next slide.
And then the next one, please. This one will be real quick because we had the opportunity to present to you about special education a few weeks back. Our special education self-contained programs that started on October 5th will continue to have their morning half days in the event that we're able to bring in more students into the hybrid. We will continue to utilize that individualized remote learning plan. We're going to have the remote learning plans in place for students until we return to 100% in person. Because as we know, the full IEP with all the IEP supports is written traditionally, obviously, we didn't expect this pandemic, so written for that in-person full time. So again, we'll continue to run concurrently the remote learning plan for each individual student, as well as updating their IEPs and following timelines for evaluations and annual reviews and those types of opportunities. What's really nice about the in-person opportunities, collecting that data for the IEP is much a much easier process with the in-person. So again, we'll continue to follow those pieces. We'll continue to have our IEP meetings. The school-based preference is to do the IEP meetings remote, and so we will do those remotely unless a parent were to request an in-person meeting, and then we have the appropriate PPE and spacing in a conference room in that case. Any student that requires any changes to their accommodations or modifications, again, just like during a regular school year, we can make those accommodations and changes fluidly throughout the school year. And additionally, with the hybrid schedule, so the students aren't here the full day, we would be able to continue with what we're doing right now, where for some students, it makes the most sense for them to receive their related services, such as speech, social work, OT. For some students, it makes the most sense for them to receive those services in person while they're in person right now. And for other students, that academic benefit in person and still Zooming for the related services for speech or whatever it might be is what's best for the student. So we're making those decisions very individually for each student on whether they get the in-person or the remote for their related services. All right, that's it for student services, unless you have any questions for me. Okay, thank you.
Okay, I'm going to talk a little bit about some calendar changes. ISB has said that each district can have up to 5 remote planning days. So our MIA admin group worked together to talk about what was important for us as far as how many days we would need with transitioning from remote to hybrid. And so it was really important to us that we use 2.5 days of our 5 before transitioning to our hybrid model. And so these were the days that were proposed, but this is subject to change depending on when the hybrid starts. So the days would be Monday, October 26th, just the afternoon, and this would be no student attendance, but teachers would be in attendance. The full day of Monday, November 2nd, and then Wednesday, November 4th, since we already have the 3rd off. During these days, there are some things that, there will be a lot of things that teachers will be doing while the students are at home. And so some of those things would include us making sure that our classrooms are prepared for the transition to hybrid. As someone who is teaching from school every day, I thought this would be easier than it actually was, just having to think about all of the things each teacher will have to think about with their space, since all of our spaces are so different. So making sure that we're maintaining social distancing, but also having a welcoming environment for our students. So even something simple like making sure our charts are laminated so that they can be sprayed, and they don't get ruined on the wall. So there's just a lot of things we want to make sure that our classrooms are welcoming for when our students come back. Also giving us time to work with our teams or departments to plan for the hybrid schedule. So that some adjustments that will need to be made is looking at our standards and our key lessons and making sure that we target those on our in-person days, and working, like Mrs. Fergus mentioned, collaborating with those teachers who are doing 100% remote so that we can all work together to make sure we have the best outcome for all of our students. And then also talking about which lessons the students will have on those on-demand days when they're not actually in person. Some other things would be professional development and training. So making sure that each building of teachers has access to our different administrators. Like if we need, Mr. Zaramba to come to Mechanics Grove one day, or Carl Sandberg to kind of walk through our classrooms with us to make sure that they're ready to go. And us being trained on new safety protocols. So even something simple like the students' entry into the building and dismissal procedures, those are going to be so much different than what they have been in the past. So that is why we are asking for 2.5 days for hybrid.
Can I, related to that, but it may not be a question for you so much, Jackie, as maybe for Kevin, but knowing that the announcements and everything that have come out about mitigation maybe going into effect, right now we're still planning for a hybrid model whenever we can start it. It may not be starting on the timeline that we had initially anticipated, but would you still want to use these remote planning days to solidify that plan, or are these going to change since one of them is next Monday? So just trying to figure out for planning perspectives.
So I think we'd go with Jackie had just described. If anything, look for one to be able to try to set things up, at least if it's working with classrooms or something like that. But as we get closer to the potential date, making sure we gave families enough time to plan for those and then use those days at that time to get the professional development that our staff's asking for.
I don't understand. So would
What
you
does that
still be
mean?
using, I don't understand the answer.
Would we use them? Yes. And I said we'd use one probably in advance so they could get their room set up. Then depending on when the hybrid would start, we would look to try to implement the time for PD for them.
So you're saying these may not actually be, that's what I'm asking.
No.
Okay.
They might not be those days.
Okay.
The way I look at it right now from you as a board, what we're doing is coming forward and saying, we're looking to ask for notifying you 2.5 days at some point are gonna be used for remote planning. Or hybrid planning, the remote planning days, as they're called.
And that we will give parents enough
Oh.
notice so that they can find alternatives.
How are the students getting instruction on those days?
They don't.
They don't.
Their days off.
Yep.
They don't on instruction.
Yep. So at this point in time, could we all, as parents, plan that Monday, the 26th in the afternoon is not going to be a student attendance day since that's next week? Or is that still to be determined?
So we'll have an official notice coming out tomorrow.
Okay.
Yeah, you may want to juggle the first day is a full day, so you can do facility, you know, it's gonna make.
I get it. I'm just asking for
Yeah, no, we're gonna
clarification because
have
I
a
was still
notice going
confused.
out.
So, okay.
Why wouldn't you, what's the rationale for not staying with these days no matter when we think we might be able to start hybrid?
Because we don't know what's gonna happen coming down the road. So as a group, we felt if we choose not to use them now based off of the metrics that are coming through, we'd rather wait until it got closer to the time when it might happen.
I would think just-in-time training, Wells, you know, you do something, something
Timely.
today and you're not using it till January, there's a.
Well, and since there's only 5 days, that makes sense because you don't want to blow
Yeah, you don't
that
want to
if-
blow it if you.
And I'm not disagreeing with it. I just wanted clarification since as a parent, I was confused. So I should probably be the only one. That's why I was asking.
It'll be all right.
Thank you.
Next slide, please. And next slide. So all of the students who qualify for transportation to and from are going to be assigned a bus route. We are currently in the process of setting those bus routes up. And if you notice, there's a theme from each of the schools, A through K and L through Z. So we're setting those bus routes based on every single student who's eligible for busing, taking the advantage of busing. Now we're using the survey results to remove those kids from the actual bus routes. What this does for us is allows us to use ISB's guideline of 50 kids per bus to maximize each route, but then we can remove them to create more social distancing. So I think the end result is going to be, while the maximum route time is 45 minutes, I think it's going to produce more like 25 and 30-minute route times, if not less than that. Just depends on how many stops they have to make and what students will be exiting the bus. And our drop-off times are 7:30 for Carl Sandburg and Mechanics Grove. That's because their start time is 7:45. 8:15 for Washington because its start time is 8:30, and 8 o'clock for Lincoln. Any questions regarding transportation?
It may, I should have maybe asked it before, but was there a different start time for MG for TWE versus regular? Okay, because
I think that was, I did see that in the.
Yeah,
I
it
think
was
it's
once
probably
it's-
the wrong schedule.
Okay, so I was like, okay, I figured, but it's.
That was super confusing.
I'm sorry about that.
So I'm correct then, maybe my assumption is then as the bus makes the route, if there's a student in the proper A or B group at Sandburg or Mechanics Grove, they will pick those, whichever student building it is up.
No, we're still separating buildings, so we're also not, I guess, cross-contaminating, is that's not the right word, but we're
Yeah.
not.
You're right.
We're trying to keep them in their own little group, like,
Exactly.
yes, okay. Pods, think of pods, yes, we got it, okay. So then, and then Washington would be separate and some would be Lincoln, okay, so where do students go after they pick up their lunch or they go home?
Where do they go?
Yep, if there's no adult at the house.
they're being dropped off just like they would at normal, normal time. So there must be an adult for, I think it's up to grade, yeah, through grade 2, they must have an adult present to take the kids off the bus. If there isn't, then that stops the whole route and we have to get involved and so forth. That's only happened about 5 times since I've been at this district. So just like with all the other procedures that we follow during a normal school year, we will follow the same procedures, just different timing.
But during a typical school year, some of those students would be going to a Park District program or
And-
some other alternative program, right?
And we still have Park District programs that will be running, and
Okay,
they will
will
be transported just like they would to those special programs. So again, we're running this just like we would during the normal school year.
Yeah, there's some of those Park District programs housed in District 75 schools.
One is held at Washington and one is over at Dunbar.
Okay.
Just like we do during the normal school year. Okay, thank you very much.
Next slide, please. Home stretch. Take me out to the matrix. All right, here we go. We've had a smaller committee get meet and to go over what we would want to use as some of our guiding principles to determine what phase of learning we'd be in, whether it's remote, hybrid, full in person. The group we had would require 3 key metrics, right down here on the left side. Incident rate, positivity percentage, and the testing. The 2 key ones that we're really looking at are the incident rate and the positivity rate. What we're saying along those metrics when we put them together, we've decided to include 4 phases. Phase 1 is all remote. We broke phase 2 compared to what the county does into 2 different ones, of phase 2 and 3. So there's a hybrid learning focus for small groups. The example would be that's what we're currently in right now, where we have some of our supported learning programs in the buildings right now learning, not full level grades or departments coming back. The phase 3 would be the hybrid learning plan by grade level or by department, where you're looking to bring in larger numbers of students, all staff back into the building. And then phase 4 is the full in-person learning phase. That's the one where you've got to have all the levels drastically low. We need to have guidance from our state legislators to be able to go back into that phase. We use the same metrics that are being used by the county to determine what phase we're in. Now, in order to be in a phase, right now we're in phase 2. According to the county, we need to stay in that for 10 days. And here's how fast things change. It's already changed down to 7. So between the time this PowerPoint was created to the time it's been posted up here to share with you, the minimum days are 7 from the county. And we discussed that today as a group. And it's something that we do want to look at going to, so that can help us with how we interchange from going up to a phase or down to a phase. But in order to do that, we need to be in all 3 of the phase at least to be able to move into it for that time. So that means if we had what incident rate was here, and then you had one here for positivity and testing was here, the most we would be in then right now would be in phase 2. That's our lowest right now, at the highest incident rates that we'd have. Okay? So we want at least all 3 to be in the 1 column. Couple of things. We are going to monitor it daily. I'm going through that. Fortunate enough being able to do that with both districts. We are going to be making it available for staff to find it on the intranet piece for them. We will have a posting on the website also for our community to be able to see where we're at, so that they'll have access to that. These indicators right here are shown on the Lake County site. So what we can do, next page, Anna, is we've made these specific for our zip code. So the data that we're pulling are our students only in District 75. And that's what this reflects. So back on 1010, we were right here. We're still in this phase right here right now. Positivity percentage is still below 5. Even as of today, it was at 4.1. The testing, it's still been 3 days or less for a turnaround time. That's the indicator that the county put on, because they also believe if the numbers start getting too delayed with the testing results, that would skew the other two up above. Now, what's happened and why the counties put out the notice, Lake County's numbers, and this is different, they're higher than all of ours as a county. So Lake County's incident rate now was 21 today. 7-day rolling number, it's 21. Today, for us in Mundelein, we were at 16.1. So we are in our 4th day, I believe, of being at 14 or higher for positivity. So that means if we have 3 more days of that, we're going to be bumped down into phase 1 for here. That's where we've got to start providing notice and heads up for our community, our staff, and our students. Even right now, this rate is still at 4.1. It has increased some, but not to the level to where we would expect to be seeing it increasing up to here. Lake County is up around 8. So when you take all that into consideration, what we're trying to do, we're seeing where the numbers are. We're trying to base it off of what we're seeing from the county, because we are trying to, we're not isolated as a community. We're beyond Mundelein of taking that all into account. Shane mentioned earlier that if we start seeing cases come into our buildings, we've agreed to be able to meet with our team. The team has membership, union membership on there of how we want to address it for each of our buildings. So we want to try to do the best we can to err on the side of caution. And when we get to the point of being in hybrid, being able to maintain some consistency also for our students and our staff. So we want to be able to use this document to help guide the decision-making for us. It's one of the key things for us is we want to try to maintain and being in a phase for as long as we can. We do not want to be going back and forth every time one of these numbers may change. That's why the consistency piece is critical, because we want some consistency to take place for our students and our staff. We've heard that's critical already. So we make a move, we want to make sure it's going to be there for a while. Now, the other thing the county has said, if hypothetically, let's just say all the numbers went up to here in a week, and we've been back here at phase 1. The county's telling all schools, their recommendation is you can only jump 1 phase at a time. You need to be there, well, it says 10 days, but now we're saying 7, before you can go to the next, provided all the numbers stayed at least within that area or better. Okay? So for us, as we look forward, and Christy, kind of your question, we need to confirm what we're seeing data-wise. We want to be able to provide our parents and staff communication of saying what we're seeing. What we'd anticipate is if we do go to a hybrid, we're going to give people at least a 7-day notice before doing it for our staff, which would make it approximately 14 days for families to know, here's when we're anticipating being able to go to the hybrid model for them, so that they have an opportunity to plan. The week before also gives our staff an opportunity to still make sure they're prepared to be able to be back into the classroom with the kids.
This isn't currently on the website, but it will be,
No.
right? That's what you said? Okay.
Yeah, it will be.
Okay.
It keeps changing so frequently that
Got it.
want to make sure.
When we get to that point, that's fine, just clarify.
Questions? Well,
So this is a huge improvement. Thank you very much. We started out not having any metrics as to what we were going to do when and how, I think, right?
Mhm.
So I appreciate that. And I just went from the website and got the graph, but I don't have the rolling 10-year numbers, 10 days numbers or 7 days. But correct me if I'm wrong, but as I read the thing, it is their recommendation. It is not, it is up to the local district to make a decision. So having said that, you know, I think it would be reasonable for this board to consider whether or not we're going to take some sort of formal stance as to whether or not that's what we want to comply with or not.
And based on what Wells just said and something you said a moment ago, Kevin, about our numbers being very different than Lake County's, has anybody taken into consideration, and this is factual information, that the Lake County numbers are being skewed by Great Lakes? The number of cases coming out of Great Lakes are dramatically higher because they're taking in 2,000 kids from all over the country every week. Even though those kids are being quarantined for 10 weeks once they get there, they're still bringing the virus onto the base. I don't have the person's name in front of me or the information, but the numbers are being skewed by that. So with what Wells just said, and you're saying our numbers are different than the counties, do we?
Not that much. Yes. They are different, but they're not that much different.
Right, our numbers are still trending up.
Right.
So we're at 16. Right now, we've got at least 3 or 4 days in a row of being over 14 in this one. And it's continuing to climb right now. So I'm anticipating tomorrow will be day 5. This one right now has so far to go to get anywhere down here. I don't think this one's going to be impacting us by the end of the week. That's not an issue, and this isn't the issue. I mean, these are our Mundelein numbers. It's 4-1 today. Yeah, and 16-1 right now here for the 4th day.
Yeah.
So I think that's what we take. We do need to look on our own information and to be able to say what we think we should be doing.
So I guess the question is, are you looking for an answer from us right this point, or when we get to that point, then we make that decision, or what is the proposal?
So I view it a little bit differently. In the current circumstances, I think it's twofold. Not that it is similar. I look at what we're going through as well, determining we're bringing kids in or out of a building or staff in another building. To me, it's much like weather-related decisions that we'd be making. For who, I think Tanya mentioned that to me today. It feels like every day we're deciding whether or not we should be in or out of school, like when it's a weather day. So I would think that would be something of why you have us in place to do that. Whether or not we go into a hybrid or choose to go in hybrid, that's why we're here to ask you if the hybrid model is something that you can support going for the district. But I don't agree that the board should take a vote whether or not we should go in or out of what model we're in. And I don't know if that's what you're asking, Wells.
So I don't know if it's in the current policy, but previously we have had, and it's been in, I don't know if it's policy or administrative procedure, we have had heat index issue, again, back to weather, where if the heat index was Y, we did not have school, and if it was different than Y, it was okay to have school. That's where I was thinking of.
Okay.
Is should we, that we would adopt this matrix.
Okay.
Based on your recommendation and the healthcare department saying that if the numbers were X, Y was permissible, and if they were way over that, Y wasn't permissible, was my thought. Just so that, whatever, it's clear as to whether or not the district's board supports that or not.
Agreed. So we're on the same page. Yeah, I would agree with you. Because to me, if the board approves going through the hybrid plan, we'd say that's the matrix. And I don't know if you're thinking maybe the board would want to pull that out. What I think that does do is it sends a clear message as a board. You're looking at our community data and having that as the basis gives us the guidelines, say yes to stay in or out of session. Does that make sense?
And I think that's what we asked him to do back in
Yeah,
July.
yeah,
We had said,
exactly.
develop one so that it's not entirely administrative discretion. So that I think this gives a very clear answer with where we're at. Because I think, I mean, if in our zip code, we're all for phase 2 or what have you, if we've adopted this matrix, we've basically told the administration we're good with that as long as we're all there. At the same time, if we're just, you know, even if we're all in phase 3 for a period of time, but you see the numbers starting to go, and if the whole rest of the county goes into a mitigation phase and we're not, I don't think your intention is to have us be like a, you know, blazing the trails district, because inevitably it's probably going to filter in anyway. If it's happening all across the county, it's going to come in. But to Rob's point, if it's basically only happening in one part, but it's not impacting our zip code, that doesn't necessarily mean we have to totally make changes in our zip code if it's not indicating as such. So,
Yep.
okay.
Agreed. So I'm in favor of indicating that we agree with this matrix in terms of which phase we're in. I'm not so sure, I'm still debating as to whether or not I would agree for this particular hybrid structure for this particular school, what you want to call it, schedule, I guess.
Understood.
An hour's worth of transportation for 3.5 hours worth of in-person instruction. I don't know.
I understand the objection to all this. Is there an alternative? I'm just.
Well, I appreciate, and I think the other members that have spoken to the primary impediments being, one, how do you deal with lunch and that sort of thing? That is a big challenge. I get that. But you know, once the students are there, they're going to be exposed to whatever they're exposed to. If they're there for 3 hours, they could be there for 5.
Except for lunch.
Except for lunch.
That's the big issue.
Yeah, and they're going to be, you know, they're with their same classmates.
But they're not unmasked
I guess
eating.
it all boils down to lunch then, because if they're there for 5 hours, you gotta feed them.
Right.
That's the bottom line.
Yeah, so that, you know, that's, I mean, I think that's a heck of a.
One thing we haven't discussed, which I think is part of the plan though too, is that unlike how we discussed back in July, the assumption that I've been understanding with this plan is that we are expecting all staff, unless they have an ADA accommodation, to be teaching from the building, even if they're remote teaching. Is that accurate?
We're having everybody come back in?
Yes. Yeah, didn't I see regardless of where we're at in the metric, on the 22nd, I think it was, all the teachers will be back in the classroom?
We've initially asked for staff to come back.
We've told staff that if kids are not in the building, then they can work.
So if we end up as a district going back all remote, that may be different. But assuming we are moving forward with the plans we've talked about, and assuming we're moving toward a hybrid, whether you've chosen it or not, we are, as a district, expecting the teachers, unless they have an actual ADA accommodation that they've been granted the ability to work from home, everybody will be in the building, which then creates the issue of having to deal with, you know, when kids are not in masks and if they're eating lunch, that creates another impediment, because now we've got more people in the building and they all have to eat, and the kids have to eat, and, you know, we can only go outside and socially distance for so long when it's cold and getting colder. You know, and so I think I can appreciate that this hybrid model is not a hybrid model that's going to work to make it easier as working parents to be working parents. That's not what this is intending to do, and that's unfortunate, but at the same time, we're trying to work towards a perfect model or a more perfect model, rather than throwing one into place and then finding it all crumble and it doesn't work.
Right.
And we
Starting
can
point.
build upon it.
And I think we're trying
Yeah.
to come up with a plan that works for our
As many-
district, and it
correct.
doesn't make sense to say, well, this school over here is doing that, why can't we do it? Or you know, there's so many variables at each not only within our buildings, but every other comparator that you want to make, that I think we have to trust that they're making the best recommendation for our schools.
So maybe one of the things that we could do, or if you have a discussion, if as a board, you'd want to have what are some of the things that we could look to come back to in regards to transportation? Because ultimately, we're not going to know exactly where we are with the actual transportation times. We're estimating them. Maybe it means come back and we say if we added, if we added X, Y, and Z routes, it would decrease times. Because I mean, we have to do that at the beginning of the year anyway to make sure how routes are balanced and making sure people are getting here. Maybe it's that's an option that we say we'll bring back. If we find out that routes are longer than what we'd seem as reasonable, we bring it back and say, okay, to modify that or correct it, here's an option we can do.
Well, I mean, before all this happened, if some routes were 45 minutes, 50, right? So, you know, almost an hour, you know, if they were staying at that length of period, so I'm spending 2 hours to get 3.5 hours worth of instruction. That's a bit of a, you know, doesn't seem like a very good trade-off in some ways. Now, like you say, and I agree, yeah, and I don't have any idea what the mix was in terms of if we've had, you know, indication about we got approximately X percentage that are going to stay remote only anyway, or X, you know, and that sort of thing.
We're hearing that later.
I was gonna say, is that gonna be discussed? Because we haven't heard that yet.
We'll hear it.
All right.
Okay.
So why don't we go ahead, we can go to that then. Why don't you bring us home, share some of the
Sounds good.
results from the
Thank you.
survey?
Can you go to the next slide? The next, yeah, that one, that works. Okay, one back, there you go. All right, so, yes, so we had started talking about making sure that families have choice, that we have options for all of our varying students. So when we looked at the results, and I'm giving you as of this morning, because some of this has changed because we've been making phone calls. At Carl Sandburg, 44% are choosing remote, 36% are choosing hybrid, and we have to follow up with 20% of families. That was our biggest follow-up that we had to do. At Mechanics Grove, 51% were requesting remote, 43% requesting hybrid, and a 6% follow-up. And then at Washington, 43% each for remote and hybrid, with following up with 15% of those families. So I think as you see, some of the same trends we saw in some of our data from the spring, younger families with younger children are choosing hybrid a little bit more often than our older families with older students. Obviously, the older students piece is a little bit skewed because we have a larger follow-up with our students. This has actually been a really good follow-up because as our secretaries have followed up with students, we've found out some of them have moved and things like that, or are not coming back, or other things like that. So very good information. Again, we want to focus on our students in person. That was the purpose of our presentation tonight. We're still offering that robust remote option for our students. And as we said before, we want to offer options to meet the needs, the various needs of our families in the district. And we started off saying some of our students are thriving in a 100% remote setting. Some of our students are not. And so we want to be able to provide all of those as we move forward. Can you go to the next slide, please? These are our commitments, and I think I mentioned this is our starting point. We don't know what will come in the future. There may be needs to make changes, as you heard from the county mitigation possibilities. We may need to change direction, stay remote a little longer. We'll make those decisions soon and let families know. Our commitment continues to be to kids, and we're going to be in constant communication with our families through our various methods. And just as sort of what we had talked about tonight, we're looking for approval of our plan, not necessarily for the timeline that's involved. That's something that's kind of something that we have to figure out as we move along. We believe that metrics at some point will improve to the point where we can have a hybrid. We're holding out our hope for that. Next slide. So you see that this is our patients, right? Things are changing rapidly. You saw on the slide for just the metrics. That was something that we submitted to the board on the 10th, and today's the 20th. It's already changed tremendously with both the guidance for the 10 to 7 days and then also the numbers as we go through. So with that, we'll go to the next slide and we'll take some questions, or if there are any other questions that maybe we didn't get to today.
Dan, I just wanted to right away thank you. The board submitted a huge amount of questions this time, and for you and anybody else that helped respond to them, I just wanted to thank you guys, because it put everything in a very concise, kind of all in one place. Then we had, there's so much happening, and so I just wanted to thank you guys for that effort, because I know it was an effort, but for me, and I'm sure for others, it was really helpful to see kind of where we are definitively right now, today, versus where we had been. So thank you for that.
I appreciate that, but really, like, we need to be thanking our teachers 100-fold. I get to teach once a week in a remote setting. I'm tired at the end of that, and our teachers are doing it 5 days a week. And that is just, we need to make sure that we're providing them thanks.
But I mean, in
on a daily
preparation
basis.
for
But thank
this
you.
meeting
Yes.
specifically, thank you for everything everybody does all the time.
This wasn't specifically asked ahead of time, and I just thought of it, so I don't expect an answer off the cuff, but it might be an indication of when we get to the point of being able to adopt it, whenever the metrics, or implement it, whenever the metrics allow. How, I know as a parent of my 3 kids, how it's compared to, the remote learning we did in the spring, but has there been, have there been some kids who still are not participating and are not, I know there was a level of them in the spring who we weren't really having contact at all. How it,
I'll leave that to our teachers. I mean, they're the ones who are every day. So can you give us some indication of how your kids are participating, to what extent? Are we having better participation than we had in the spring? Any of your observations?
I think.
Jenny, if whoever comes up, can you come up so you can be by the owl?
Sorry, and then I'll like my
By the
more
owl.
work now. So
Sorry,
I
you
apologize.
got eyes.
No, you're fine. So I think compared to spring, when spring was just kind of survival and emergent planning, yes, it is, the remote model is a lot better. Is it ideal for student responsiveness and my ability to help a student when they need the help right then and there? No. I know, Wellesley brought up like 3 hours, but what I can get done in 3 hours in person might take me a week in hybrid, because I can, in person, I can walk around and I can quickly assess my students that are there. Whereas in hybrid, it's cameras are off, which is fine, but asking, okay, can you hold up your notebook? Can I see? And it's doing that for all 25 students times 2 classes, all 46 students. And that takes a good chunk of our remote day, just to get that answer.
Thank you.
I'll kind of just add on for middle school. The participation is significantly better than it was in the spring. I think Jenny described that perfectly. I mean, spring was survival, but now we do have, we're able to get trainings this summer. We were able to put things in place as teachers to make this much more successful. But I'll echo, it's hard. I mean, every day is hard. And it's funny, I'm a mom in the district of a kindergartner now. And when I see him in his room and I hear his amazing teachers who are like, okay, can you go back on mute? I need you to calm down. Okay, stop drawing on the screen. And I'm sitting at my computer going, is anybody there? Can you respond to me online? Can you respond to me in the chat? And so the struggles are different for all of the age levels, but the idea of being able to get back to some in person, I mean, like Jenny said, a little bit of time in person will go a long way, because we can check in. I mean, in math, it's so hard right now to see their work and to see what they're doing. So even though I might not be able to walk around and check in like I would normally do in person, if I'm standing at the front, I can actually see what they're writing, and it would just be so helpful for all of us, I think.
Thank you.
Kevin?
I was hoping we could get more student services update from Jamie. Because you actually have anecdotal, but you actually have data of our kids in the building with our teachers.
So we've had some feedback from parents and then from some of our staff and our teams. And I actually had the opportunity the first 2 days, October 5th and October 6th, to sub in a classroom that was a lot like the classroom I taught in when I was a teacher. So it was amazing. The way that things are set up with the students having their own individualized manipulatives and their own areas, their just the hands-on and then the interaction, and because the rooms are self-contained, for our students that might have some needs or some mask exemptions or just some different pieces like that, we have the plexiglass, but we're still able to assess very regularly. And so the feedback we've heard from the staff is that they're just enjoying being with the students. I mean, with this turn with the COVID numbers, I think it's very disappointing. If you were to ask the staff, I haven't asked all of them, but so far with what we're hearing from the information that we shared on Sunday night to now is just a disappointment because they're really engaged with the students. I think because we've just been in 2 weeks, Dan and I were talking about this earlier today, we haven't gotten to the point of doing a ton of like more formalized benchmarking assessments. They have done some baseline assessments, but I didn't think the shift was going to be so fast. So there's that. So I don't know that we have as much like of the concrete data. And then what we've heard from parents so far is that they're just seeing so much more just that connection and engagement from the students with our students transitioning to, a third grade building or from the preschool to the kindergarten building, just that ability to get to know their teammates, their teachers, and then their peer groups has been really great. The kids are really excited to come to school. So overall, I think it's been really successful and we've gotten really positive feedback from our staff. And we have Brianna here, who's one of our teachers as well. Not to put you on the spot, but is there anything that I missed in my?
On the spot.
All eyes.
Oh yeah, come up here and be really on the spot.
Stand right in front of the owl.
Well, I'm not one of the teachers that has kids in the building, I'm in the building, but I don't have kids right now, but it's really cute to hear all of them in the hallway. And so the rooms are set up differently, but I can still see that they're able to play. And I know that the kids already have the routine. They know if the dirty toy bin is moved, they know that, oh, wait, where is it? By day 2, they already knew the procedures and oh, I'm done playing with this, it goes in here. I know where everything goes. And it's really cute to hear their voices and have a sense of normalcy in the hallway. So.
And Jimmy, can you give us an idea approximately? How many kids, how many teachers, how many classrooms are we using?
Right now? Sure.
Yeah.
Every building has 1 to 2 classrooms open, and each classroom has anywhere from 2 to 3 to 4, really 2 to 6 students. I think we have 1 classroom that's a little higher than I want to say closer to 8 in the middle school. But the rest of the classrooms are pretty small, and it's really cool. So we have some kids, some situations where they're working fluidly, where they want to zoom in and have a student that's predominantly working at home do the social work groups and stuff like that. Again, I learned so much having those first 2 days in the classroom at MG. It was awesome. It was amazing. But yeah, the classroom sizes are really quite small right now. So and so we've got approximately, I think it's 8 teachers teaching in person.
And then any challenges that we're learning from that can help if we?
Yeah, I would say one of the things is just, it's kind of a challenge / it's we're a little bit in awe too, because as the students are going through the hallway and keeping the social distancing and the reminders about spacing and going to the bathroom and just, again, following all those cleanliness procedures. Going out to the playground, we've done, again, I'm really referencing my 2 days of the stuff, which was so fun. When we went out to we had recess. And so then the awesome facilities team came out in between. There's a set schedule of who's using the equipment when. So they're able to clean up spray down the equipment before the next group comes out. The kids are able to have a mask break with very little prompts the second day of school. They're still realizing not to get too close into each other's spaces. Just a lot of really good, not a ton of prompting has been really has been needed because we've been doing so much. I think even the teachers were doing while the kiddos were at home preparing to come in, like the social stories about social distancing and about washing our hands and, you know, being extra clean and like, don't be afraid of the mask, but we need to wear them. So I think the kids were prepared in that way. And so that part's been really great. I can't think of one area. If I can think of something, I'll share it at some point later. But right now, I think things are going pretty well. Mark, did you have something?
Well, I was just gonna say, Kevin, to your point, I think one of the things that Rachel shared actually at Team Today was just, she has, both her and the teaching assistant just have to watch their spacing. Kind of to Kurt's point, it's a little different when you come back in person and you're trying to watch the 6 feet. And the fact, and training themselves to, it's natural to walk over, lean over a shoulder, or pair up a kid to help, and you can't necessarily do that. So I think that's been the one thing she shared, is just those natural tendencies you kind of have to train yourself a little bit out of, and you have to be aware to handle it differently.
Great, thank you, Jamie.
Yeah.
So Dan, I want, so, because I didn't see the survey, did the survey indicate the approximate time of the hybrid schedule?
The approximate start times or the approximate
Start time
timing?
and end time.
Yes.
It may have, but it had to change in the meantime, because you noticed that MG went to.
Well, I'm not talking 15 minutes, I'm talking about the fact that it's essentially
Yes.
AM.
The letter that went
Yes.
out
I'm just-
did,
yes.
no, I know, but
I
I'm
didn't
just,
see it, so.
I understand, that's why I'm sharing.
Yeah.
The letter did have an approximate schedule for each grade level
Okay.
or each building level as to what the schedule would approximately look like, and it was a draft version of what we saw, but it was very similar to the different colored sections, and they knew that it was morning and Wednesdays being hybrid.
All day.
I'm sorry, remote for
Remote.
everybody on Wednesdays, and afternoons all being remote for everybody.
Okay.
The part that wasn't really in there that I know a lot of parents were asking, and that's why I asked, it was the teacher changing part, because it
Right.
did say, as the FAQ, that, you know, teachers might change, we're gonna do our best not to, but that made people nervous. But I think hearing that it's not maybe a complete teacher change, there may be a couple of exceptions, but for the most part, the idea is not to have a complete teacher change where we're pulling kids out of what they're used to, but it's to mold it a little, but still keep them identified with their afternoon teacher, their current teacher in the afternoon and on Wednesdays.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? So, thank you very much.
Kevin, can I just ask, to Wells' point, the letter that had gone out had said you were gonna follow up after today's board meeting with families, but now, given everything else that's there, you're gonna be following up more, but maybe not in the way that we initially thought, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
So before we continue on superintendent's report, I'll be coming to you first, Lisa, for press 105 updates. I want to make sure we do give credit. Dan mentioned the staff. Everybody here tonight, thank you so much. The thought that we had 23 people all coming together plus to be able to help create a plan speaks volumes for how we as a district are trying to work together to come up with the best products we can to meet our students' needs and support our staff. So thank all of you for being here tonight, presenting to the board. Couldn't appreciate it more. Please, you gotta get home because you gotta get teaching in the morning.
We'll answer the questions. We'll get the questions from whoever's running this meeting, and then we'll answer them online.
From the question and answer that gets submitted, yeah, we'll get a copy of the questions that get submitted, right? Okay, so moving on to the superintendent's report, we've got a couple of items to be able to go through. First up, I was asking Lisa and Wells to go through the press policy 105, with any of the highlighted items that were different from what we have from attorney review and stuff, because this is the second and final reading.
Right,
Lisa?
so I'll give the kind of the first overall summary that I gave last month, that most of the changes were a result of the creation of a new policy. It's 265, plus the updating cascade that happens out from that to anything that 265 touched, which was on Title IX regulations. As I said before, there's a few straightforward yes/no questions that were pretty easy to answer. And then we did ask for board attorney input on the packet as well. So hopefully you guys were able to read through that. Basically on 265, their advice for the two components where we had a choice was to use the default regarding whether or not to have a live grievance process, and the default was no. And that explanation was in their response, as well as which standard of proof we adopted, and the standard recommended was the preponderance of the evidence default. So related to 265, the attorneys also submitted recommended modifications. They weren't major, but there were some modifications to policy 260. Those involved, it was kind of a reordering of some of the steps of the grievance process and a little clarification. So that was kind of, it wasn't changing the substantive nature of the policy or what was there, just for a little clarity. So then on 710, there were two choices about whether to adapt the default language or the more detailed supplemental language, which is a more forceful and descriptive statement of the law. Their advice, as well as Shane's, was to not adopt the supplemental language. Then associated with that policy 720, there were some minor recommendations that they had highlighted in the red line version to be changed. So did anybody have any questions about the packet, the attorney feedback, and the adoption of Press 105? And then Wells, did you have anything to add?
Well, so for the ones that the attorneys reviewed, right, we want to adopt as they modified and remove the footnotes.
Correct. So
Right.
we drafted a modified resolution to capture that.
And that's what we'll end up putting in our policies.
Yeah, you're right. So yeah, that's a good add, that part of their recommendation was also involving the footnotes.
And then the other ones that are just yes or no's, then we adopt what Lisa has recommended, and then we remove the footnotes, and then we should be good.
I read through the attorney's letter and the stuff, and it all made sense to me, and I know Shane had also weighed in with all of this, and I let you know that I agreed with that.
Freddie, you out there? Do you have any questions?
I'm here. No questions on my end.
Okay, great. Just didn't want you to feel left out there.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay. Next two items, we have our nomination for who's going to be our delegate. Has already been assigned.
Yeah, I was like, hopefully nobody disagrees, because I'm already registered.
I nominate Ms.
Yeah, we do need to do that, the official business tonight. So with us all anticipating Christy will be doing that role for you. And Christy had sent out some emails asking for feedback about the resolution, so Christy, I'll hand it off to you.
And then for Freddie's benefit, I did it last year, which is why it was sort of just assumed that I would do it this year. And we kind of figured out after the last board meeting that normally this is a piece that I would take part in at the delegation at the seminar that's in November. This year it's going online, but because they're doing a one-day seminar with all of the pieces, they're not doing the delegation part that day. So instead, they're doing it, and I didn't print out the dates. They're all on my calendar. But essentially, it's before the next court date. My day job. It's before the next board meeting that the the two seminar. I know the 21st is one of them. So yeah, that, and then
I had 11.5. I had 10.21 and 11.5.
right, and then, the actual nominate, piece of it is on another date. So I will
14.
take care of that, and I have those in my calendar, but we couldn't, wait to have somebody register for it and then deal with it, because by the next board meeting, we'd be done. So, that's why we sort of took that step. So if anybody has an undying need to be the delegate, I can certainly, only one of us can be registered at a time. I can certainly drop it and pass it along, but if no one else minds, then I've already done it. So I had sent out the packet for everybody to take a look at, that I was able to download off the website. Supposedly our district's been sent some hard copies. If anyone really wants them, I'm sure they're floating around somewhere, but it doesn't matter. Ultimately, there are there's 8 new resolutions. There's 3 reaffirmation of existing positions, and then a new belief statement that will be put up. So the IASB is the organization that, it's the association of school boards, but they have a legislative arm that can lobby and do things on behalf of using the dues that I'm sure get all paid by all the districts, et cetera. And this is a matter of trying to give them feedback and how we want those lobbying dollars and hours spent and applied. And so as a group, every year, they have resolutions. They opened it up earlier this year that any board, if they felt strongly about an issue, could draft a resolution, submit it, and then it would get reviewed by a committee. So the committee that they have goes through and takes a look at it in light of their general policies. Their general policies to try to encourage, since we are a large state with very different needs in different parts of it, they are wanting to encourage local boards to be able to have autonomy in doing things so that we all don't have one particular a narrow focus that applies to one part of the state that may not apply in the other. So the committee looked at them in light of what their history is and how they usually do it, and came out with recommended, whether they recommend we adopt or recommend we do not adopt these various resolutions. So as our board here, I had sent it all out ahead of time, finding out if everybody has strong feelings one way or the other, for how they want to give me, a recommendation of how they want me to vote on behalf of our board on these resolutions. So a number of them, the recommendation was not, to support them, so to oppose them. And they listed out in that document that I sent out various reasons why they would oppose them. One of them they opposed only because it was very similar to number 7. So otherwise they're very similar. So that was the only reason they opposed one, and they recommended adopting the other one, giving local control in a pandemic for all the reasons that we've already been experiencing. One of them, as an example, was e-learning on an election day. Well, this year we know that the governor decided that it was going to be a holiday, so we had to throw that into our calendar after we'd already adopted the calendar last year. This resolution is saying schools should have the option of saying it's going to be an e-learning day rather than a complete day off, so that it doesn't necessarily have to count towards the holidays, in the school calendar, extending it. One of them is about expanding the licensing, provisions to try to address teacher shortages and allow it a little bit easier to get teachers licensed in that regard. A number of the ones that they've asked or they've recommended to oppose had to do with starting a low-cost loan program for school districts to be able to borrow money in the event they need to address things in COVID. The reason why they've recommended not to oppose or to oppose that one, not to support it, is that if you're relying on the state to borrow money that you're then going to borrow from them, they should, if the state has the ability to fund and to get funding from somewhere to help with some of those local resources, the state should be doing that rather than just saying, oh, yeah, you can borrow it and we'll be the conduit for the bank. So they were opposing that. Gun storage.
Which I don't understand, because there's a capital development plan, which the state borrows the money, And if the school district qualifies, they can,
But I think that's the issue, is that if that already exists, there's,
We don't need
to
because
add,
it's not a capital issue that they're potentially funding with if it's COVID expenses.
yeah, but in this particular issue it's larger than that. They're just saying that, so I did notice that, because 3 people got back to me, I noticed that you had a different opinion on that one, so,
You need one in every group.
and that's okay.
I knew there was a reason I brought this.
So, that was one of the few, and then there was one other one.
Yeah.
Okay.
Everybody else agreed with the recommendations of the
Okay.
committee, but I noticed that you had 2 that you had disagreed with, so I didn't know if you wanted a chance to talk and see if anybody else disagrees, or how you want me to vote.
So it was the loan program one,
What was
and
the
then
other
what's
one?
the number, the other?
The other
number?
one that he disagreed with was the teacher shortage,
The certificate, license?
number 5,
Number,
expanding the issuance of the provisional teacher licenses.
so that was to expand it to more subjects, is the way I read it, right?
Yeah, I know,
Well,
but they've already
right now
addressed it
it's-
in the prior one,
That was a different one.
yeah.
No,
okay.
because that was for pre-K licensing. This one
Right.
was just saying for in general, like
Oh.
to expand the
Because right now it's like math and science, and this is
Right.
expanding it to
other
other
subjects. They basically said that they, for the pre-K licensure one, I know the reason why they objected to it is they don't want to be in the business of telling universities what to put in their curriculum to
Right.
license, to graduate teachers. So, but to address the fact that there is a teacher shortage and
Yeah.
it's only going to probably increase as some teachers take leaves of absences and
There's a
they
lot
need
of
more subs and things
545.
like that. So this is trying to get ahead of that and say, let's make it a little bit easier to allow provisional licenses, not necessarily full-fledged.
Then I'd like to change my recommendation.
Okay, so you now agree with the committee. Now I understand. Okay. Just wanted to make sure so that, if there was
Just to
something
show you
I
that
didn't
I'm
know
flexible,
about.
you know?
you had an
That's all.
opportunity.
I'm willing-
Well, that's
I'm
okay.
willing to listen to.
went back to 1.
Yeah,
No.
so,
No, he's not budgeting.
no, I know, it's okay. Number 2, was about gun storage and wanting to require a locked gun box. But again, because they felt that was a non-education issue, that shouldn't necessarily be addressed on behalf of the entire state, and to deal with and leave that up to local control and deal with and not.
Oh,
get their
right,
hands
so
into
this is
that.
to influence
Right.
other legislation. not
Um,
having to do it.
School report cards, some district had put out a resolution saying they wanted the data for the school report card to be released by June 1st of each school year in order to allow boards to help use that report card data in clarifying their goals for the following year. And while that's a good laudable goal, the reason why they said that wouldn't be possible is that until the quarter ends and the fiscal year starts, some of that information is not available, and it wouldn't be possible to turn that around that quickly. And then if you're estimating and dealing with it, then that's not helpful, which is why right now it comes out by October after it's at. So that's why they recommended opposing that, because it just wouldn't be feasible and they'd be guessing. So if anyone, I think with the exception of number 1, everyone seems to be in line with following the recommendations.
I would
and I will
recommend
go.
that we give you authority to vote your best conscience.
Okay.
Very good. Well done. So.
You just have to do that.
There we go. All right, then the last one we have goes back to following up in regards to development of the new policy regards to 712 racial and educational equity development. So just to follow up on where we were going, the one thing that was asked of me, so this topic was also discussed with District 120. And the only thing that's come back really is the boards want to be able to discuss where they are to kind of stay in alignment, because I think each board has communicated there are differences, but still to have some connection to do that. I would encourage the members, Lisa and Wells are heading this one up, of talking with, I can do the copy email.
Are you on it?
Policy.
I'm on it.
Oh, policy. Oh,
I'll
all
fill
right.
you in.
There's policy development.
Ah.
So they're talking, Lisa Yaffe and Laura Mellon are the 2 from 120 that are working on that. But this is the time for us at 75 to say, what are some of the next steps to be able to take? Because we talked some different strategies last time, whether or not it might be a strategic plan process, or finding a different facilitator. I did reach out to a couple facilitators. One of them was willing, but took a job down in Peoria, so he's no longer available, and I haven't heard from the other one. So,
Well, and I think, I can talk to Lisa Yaffe, because I'm sure she's in the same sort of line of business I am. There's diversity programs out there and people that facilitate it, so it's a matter of finding somebody that's appropriate for our setting, and we might be able to expand the pool of possible facilitators.
okay.
So I apologize for not being at the last meeting, but where are we at with this? Lisa?
Well,
Sir, what's the question?
where are we at?
Where are we at?
Where are we at? I volunteered and I'm on the
You're on the
bias
equity.
or equity committee study group, which is primarily professional development for educators, and I'm the non-educator participant, so that I have an idea about what talking about, I guess. And then with regard to other than reading the two policies and thinking about is there something that we should have in policy, that's about as far as we've gotten with as a board in terms of talking about.
I guess that's my question more specifically. What's the board's feeling on whether or not we need a policy to address
Well,
it?
that's how it's kind of morphed. So originally, we wanted a statement or a policy around safety in schools, around people coming in and checking immigration statuses. Remember,
There was a request.
It was a
Declaration.
resolution.
Yeah,
So
resolution,
this is
declaration.
kind of morphed now into something bigger. And I think we had two people write absent last
Yeah.
meeting.
Yes.
So
Kevin and Ron.
Kevin had asked that question of,
What do we do next?
do we have a policy? Here's some two suggested policies. And then there's kind of been discussion philosophically around, okay, should it align to the high school? How involved should we be? A greater mission vision statement, and what do we do next?
So the discussion has come to the conclusion that we do want to create a policy?
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
what the five that was here last
Okay.
kind of indicated.
We're not ready to adopt it.
Not ready to
Process
adopt
of writing.
it. And so my struggle has been, okay, what direction should we be setting? Because obviously there's work going on in the school with the staff and the admin in this topic area. So, kind of how are we driving this versus how are they functioning on looking at this issue?
So, and Rob, if you have, I think it was in this packet, there were two policies, one of which had very clear board issues, right? And then there's also the article that was in the school board journal that had 10 things the school board should concern themselves with regarding equity and racial issues and that sort of thing. So I think that from my point of view, that's what we're going to consider that. That's where our purview should be.
Okay, this is a summary. I got myself last time that got at the crux of kind of what Wells and I thought, that we didn't want to adopt a boilerplate thing. We wanted some thoughtful.
So the question that we talked through last time was going through, do we look at the two current policies that other districts have developed and blend it into something that we think is a starting point for the district, or go through something where we're creating something from scratch? And I believe discussions surround more about creating something from scratch.
Well, there's also the Illinois School Board Association has a workshop, if you will, where they'll come in and facilitate a meeting. I don't know what their schedules are or how, among board members, but it has to be done in open session.
when we called on that one, it was a presentation about equity.
Okay.
It wasn't connected to how to use it to develop policy. So the way I frame it, well, is kind of what we're working through with Yvette, with the district level people, it would be something similar to that.
Okay.
So if the board thinks that'd be helpful, could certainly bring that back. I didn't pursue that further because I didn't see how I imagine she could, but that's not the
That's
intent
not her.
of that presentation.
Well, it sounds like maybe.
Well, one of
Lisa-
the items in the policy that we were provided is engage in equity thing. I mean, I will admit, I have, I'm sure, both unintended and intended biases. So I need to make sure that I understand what they are as best I can. And try
Never
to
met a
deal
person
with
that didn't have personal bias as
Yeah.
well.
So, but,
That's why he's admitting that.
you know.
I'm a little confused as to why, I understand where this started. I'm a little confused as to why we've taken it this far. I don't see this being a huge issue in District 75.
Why?
So just for my, it is an issue. Put it that way, in my humble opinion. And it has been for a long
Can you
time.
expound on that a little bit?
I mean, I think again, and how it manifests itself is,
Maybe just going through the boundaries. We had to redraw the boundaries because of going from schools, we had to redo those.
well, I mean, so that's in some ways ancient history, but I mean, again, so previously, at one point in time, this district was neighborhood schools. Right? And we reopened Lincoln School as a choice school, and we tried to make sure that it had a student population similar to this population of the other neighborhood schools, but people opted to go there, right? Try as we might and try as the administration might, we can never get a student population that was similar to some of the other schools. And we got to the point where one of the schools was going to be 50% low income and the others were in the 20s. Well, that's a very large difference, and it makes it very difficult for students to have anywhere near similar outcomes. And so the decision was made in part when we were reorganized to go to grade centers, because that way all the students would be working their way through the system together. They'd all have cohorts to model from that were some were higher income and some were low income, and some were of Latino heritage and some were not, and those types of things.
I think your example proves my point more than
I was
anything.
just gonna say, is that your point, Ron?
Because your example says there was a problem, or there was a potential for something to become a problem. The board recognized that and addressed that inequality.
Well, we've done that.
So again, I'm just trying to wrap my head around why we're spending this time and effort to create something or an issue I don't think is a problem.
And for better or for worse, at this point, the high school is still one building, so they don't have to worry about it. There are other high school districts not too far that have very different student populations, and they have to be very careful about how they address them. We don't provide financial resources by demographics. We provide financial resources by the number of students and the age and the class, the grade, if you will, and that sort of thing. I have never been in here, we've never said, well, we're not going to hire this person to go to this building because they're 4 rungs up the salary level, and so they're too expensive, that sort of thing. So I think we do, as a board, do a number of these things. But one of the things that I think we do need to address and find out, good, bad, or indifferent, how do we select students to be in Project Challenge? How do we select students to do other expansion activities and those kinds of things? How do we address students that, in general, probably don't do well on standardized tests? You know, how,
Are these things that this policy we're gonna create is gonna address directly? Because from the policies I'm reading, that those aren't the types of things that the policies are.
so that's why I think we need to go through the process and understand what the issues are so that we can create a policy that maybe addresses some of those things. Maybe I'm all wrong. I don't know. You know, the Evanston Township one was an effort about how are students selected and encouraged to take AP courses. And it's, you know, it seemed like there were systemic issues there about, you know, why was that? You know, did that change the outcome for those students? You know, I don't know. How students get selected to do Big Ten math so that they have a bigger chance of getting through in algebra by the time they leave 8th grade, and therefore they'll be potentially more successful in high school, because that's a big deal to be through algebra, right? If you're gonna go on and do, you know, exit high school with this.
So do you see a policy as formalizing those asks?
I think policy would potentially have tools that we would expect the administration to execute. I don't know.
See, and all the things you're saying, Wells, are absolutely things that as a board we should be looking at and addressing. My reservation in all of this stems from the fact that, in my opinion, this all started because of a nationally politicized issue. And here we are 4, 5, 6 months later, and we're still talking about this, and I'm struggling to understand how this specifically applies to this board, to this school district, to this student population.
And I'd like to hear from some of our students that are in, you know, upper levels of middle school in terms of what issues have they observed?
Well, here, this isn't a student, but it was a parent. And I found this very telling, and it kind of made me feel good about the town I live in and the people I live next to. Back when all of this, all the protests started and everything like that, there was a protest plan for Mundelein. And I went into work one day, and I happened to be working with a woman who had been in a biracial relationship. Her children were biracial. And she said, "Oh, are you going to the protest tomorrow?" And I didn't know anything about the protest. I just knew that division was going to be closed down. I thought there was a parade. I thought it was homecoming or something, actually. And I said, "It's the protest." I said, "No, I didn't." I said, "I know they're closing the street, but I didn't know there's." She goes, "Oh yeah, they're protesting tomorrow." And I go, "Oh, really?" I go, "That's interesting." She goes, "Yeah, I really don't get it myself. Why would they be protesting in Mundelein?" And I said, "Carissa, that's an interesting comment. Why would you say that?" And she said, "Well, it's been my experience," and this is a woman who's from a military background, so she's lived all over the country. It's been my experience that the schools are great in Mundelein, the police are great in Mundelein, and people don't have anything to complain about. They don't have anything to protest about in this town. And I thought that was, you know, rather complimentary, but also very telling of, you know, where we're at.
But wouldn't that be why we want to, as a board, make sure that our policies reflect how we want and see our district being and remaining? I mean, in one aspect, we have gone through making those changes, as well as said, from grade level, you know, doing that by having a policy in place that sort of solidifies the why behind that. It helps direct, you know, more things in the future that may be done based on that, without having the benefit of Wells reminding us about that in the future.
I have no objection to coming up with a policy that addresses the things that Wells was just talking about.
What I think.
What I'm objecting to is a knee-jerk reaction to national political climate and putting my name behind something just because we want to feel good about ourselves.
Well, that's why it has to be our policy addressing our issues that we've identified or not. I don't know.
No, and that's, like I said,
right. Yeah.
But I don't think
where I'm
it
at.
was designed to be only that. That's why we said as a board, we'd rather do a policy that dictates, you know, kind of more the
And
inverted
it's
As opposed to
triangle.
a public statement.
As a public
which is what this
statement,
originally
right.
was.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say, that's what I wanted to say. I thought that we had talked about a declaration. I remember, Rob, you were strongly opposed to the declaration, which is perfectly fine. And I thought sort of our way to sort of look at the thing was to make it a softer thing and look at our community, look at what we wanted to do and come up with a policy that would address
Number of.
whatever we
Yeah.
learned, whatever we learned
Not
about it.
just that.
And
but
Rob,
yeah.
Well, and it's more
My-
lasting than just like a knee jerk, like,
Right.
oh,
Yeah.
here's.
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah.
Then a
You
political
know,
statement. Yeah.
It's something that we're saying, this is what we're about. As opposed to just saying, here's our statement.
And my personal approach has always been, whether it's been looking at words in the mission and vision statement, is that we're not in the moment, that this is something future looking, long lasting, and a statement of how we want to be, not a reflective reaction to the moment.
Okay, anyone opposed to continue on? Because we have a lot of stuff left.
So the only thing I'm hearing then is it would probably be good to do a training in regards to what equity is, so that the board could have the same understanding, or no? Because part of what I'm hearing is Rob posed the question of what are some of the things that we've got to talk to? And what might those be? And I think you got, how does it relate to discipline? How does it relate to academics with the students that are achieving or not achieving? What's in the curriculum that you'll commonly hear? Do the students see themselves in the materials that they're using? Is that part of what we're doing? So that might be something to be able to work through. I don't know if they work with you, Pat, if that's something maybe
Those are
well to
certainly
report
issues
back
that are
to.
coming up, and it's like, I'm sitting there going, okay, so as a handy dandy board member, I gotta tell you, I don't remember the last time I didn't hire somebody that was recommended by the administration. So you wanna talk about how are we hiring? You're talking to the wrong, you don't have the right person in there. Now, and we can't very well, I don't think, set a policy necessarily that says it has to be X. But that doesn't mean we can't, maybe address it and or adopt curriculum and that sort of thing. I mean, we rarely review curriculum very much, let alone have rejected.
So we need someone to give us some guidance.
So, yeah.
Teach us.
You want to move along, but what are we doing with this policy right now? What do we want to come back with next month?
Again, I still think we need a work, we need somebody to, but it needs to be all hands on deck so we all have the same understanding of it. And or whether or not there are experiences that we can also bring in, so we know whether or not there are issues that maybe we need to address that we don't know about.
So Lisa, you referenced potentially having some resources.
Yeah, I think if we,
I'll look at that and you
yeah,
and I
I
can
mean,
talk.
I don't know if you have any more.
Okay. Well, we can hold each other and if nothing else, be able to maybe have at least some options available for the December, or November meeting. Okay? Okay,
Are you done with the superintendent's report?
that's it, sir. That's
Okay.
all.
I'd like to move to the consent agenda. I move that the Board of Education, Mundelein Elementary School District 75 approve the consent agenda of October 20th, 2020.
I'll second.
Secretary, please call the roll.
Holly.
Aye.
Okay, Fingerhut, aye. Price,
Aye.
Erickson,
Aye.
Gallegos,
Aye.
St. Clair,
Aye.
DuPont.
What did we
Consent.
ever, yeah, but what did we ever decide on, because I wasn't here?
I'm sorry.
Do I abstain or there was some
You may
conversation
vote.
about, do we?
This is
could
the
vote
consent
agenda?
this is the consent agenda.
You are allowed to vote even though you weren't here.
Unless there's something in there that you
Your objective.
think that you need to
Clarify
abstain
or-
for.
Okay. That's not, thank you.
Okay, we're going to move to the board action items. I move that the Board of Education accept the superintendent's recommendation to adopt the resolution authorizing the estimated aggregate tax levy in accordance with the Illinois School Code requirements.
Second.
Second, Mr. Erickson. Secretary, please call the roll.
Holly,
Aye.
Erickson.
Aye.
DuPont,
Aye.
Price,
Aye.
St. Clair,
Aye.
Fingerhut, aye. Gallegos,
Aye.
I move that the Board of Education accept the superintendent's recommendation to approve the resolution to publish the notice of a public hearing in accordance with the Illinois School Code requirements.
Second.
Mr. Price, seconded. Secretary, please call the roll.
Holly,
Aye.
Price,
Aye.
Gallegos,
Aye.
Claire,
Aye.
Erickson,
Aye.
Dupont.
Aye.
Fingerhut, aye.
I move the Board of Education accept the superintendent's recommendation to approve the 5-year tri-district agreement, intergovernmental agreement with Hawthorne District 73 and Fremont District 79 for preschool services at the Lincoln Early Learning Center.
I will second.
Holly,
Aye.
St. Clair,
Aye.
Gallegos,
Aye.
Price,
Aye.
Fingerhut, aye. Erickson,
Aye.
Dupont.
Mr. Holly, my intro one, please. Next.
Oh, sure. I edited one, but go ahead.
Oh, okay. So I don't know if you, well, let me try this and see what you think. Okay. I recommend the approval of the superintendent's recommendation to approve and direct the administration, to return to school using the metrics as indicated in the most recent from Lake County Health Department as provided in the board packet of 10/20.
All right, can I try mine?
Yeah, try yours. Yours is probably better.
I move the Board of Education accept the superintendent's recommendation to approve the hybrid plan with the schedule determined by the superintendent based on the District 75 metrics dashboard 7-day average.
Do we want to add something about the Lake County Health Department in their recommendations as well? Because that also
Changes.
has something to do with this?
Well, I mean, I
The
don't think so
metrics
because
is tied to the. Lake
Yeah,
County
you're right,
Health
you're right, you're right, you're right.
It's based
I
on,
second Kevin's.
Well, wait, before you say, could I
Oh,
ask
sorry.
potentially, let me
Sorry.
ask if you could, because I wanted to add to that, including at least a 14 calendar day notice to parents prior to starting the hybrid model. I didn't see that anywhere in the presentation.
Yeah, it was just kind of explained.
It was explained, but it wasn't.
No, I think
I-
that's.
I wanna make
would
that
be a good
explicit.
thing to add.
So what that could do is put us out 21 days if we require it. Just trying to think that through, Wells.
You said you were gonna give 14 days notice to
Didn't
parents
say
before you
7.
start.
Disagree with you, I'm just
Okay.
thinking through the other part of it, that's all.
I didn't specify how long, many days you had to get staff.
that's why I included with the schedule determined by the superintendent. Anyone have any opinions?
It's been changed 2 or 3 times, what we're doing without having another meeting. Going into hybrid, out, not hybrid, total remote, that's it, without having any direction from this board.
It should
Okay,
be an issue because the resolution by the governor that the board accepted said we'd be able to do that.
What was your concern, Kevin, that we go to 21 days?
So-
What's the scenario you were thinking
I'm
of?
just trying to think if that would extend anything to where if we would be able to come back sooner. And if we're able to give parents a 10-day notice that we're pushing it out for. I can't think of something exact off the top of my head. I just, when you say must.
You wanna
have
make it
at least
10, I
one
can
minimum,
live with 10, but I want,
A sufficient amount of time
Yeah,
for people to be
rather
able
than
to.
just leave it at
Yeah,
your
and if
decision.
I understand where you're adding 7 to it, it's because you're saying it's gotta be the 7-day average. So that 7 days has to pass before then the 10 or 14 is triggered. So that's where you're adding, where if you have 14 plus the 7, that's 21 days. That's where, just playing that out.
I'd like to think that from administrative to staff perspective, we want to give our people as much time as we possibly can. So I struggle, personally, this is something that's more of a logistic. This isn't a policy piece about oversight, but what goes on in the day-to-day operations. So to me, when the board puts in a restriction like that, that does become limiting in some effect. And I'm not here saying I want to give people last minute notice, but in my opinion, that is not the board's role to set the limited days when you want us notifying people and stuff.
Okay, so Rob, go ahead and second the motion.
Well, wait, he seconded yours?
No, Kevin made the motion.
Right.
Rob second.
I mean, I'm sorry, I meant his.
Any more discussion?
Do you want to read it one more time?
Yeah, I could do that. That'd be good. I move that the Board of Education accept the superintendent's recommendation to approve the hybrid plan as presented with the schedule determined by the superintendent based on the District 75 metrics dashboard 7-day average.
So to Kurt's point, where they come back tomorrow and they say it's a 5-day average.
Well, our motion says 7-day average, so.
Right, so we couldn't change it.
Right. So, I mean, I put that in there because I thought that was important, just because, you know, we've already gone from 10 to 7, I don't want to go to 5. And then I thought, you know, superintendent discretion, the schedule determined by the superintendent, I mean.
Schedule of.
Yeah, I mean, he said to us that he's not gonna, you know, I take him at his word. That's why I
I would
included.
imagine that Kevin would contact us about what would possibly be a reasonable time frame to open, or at least to ask a little bit of our input on that.
Can do, definitely.
Or you could be like District 128, have an emergency board meeting tonight.
Yeah, I'd rather have a board meeting.
Kevin, the one word you have in there is average.
Yes.
I guess what I'd say, are we talking the 7-day minimum? 7 days in a row? That's the verbiage on that metric sheet. that
Okay,
we need
7-day
to be-
minimum.
Yeah, 7-day minimum. So then that says that we're at least in 7 days. So even if the chance went down, as a board, and what we've even talked committee-wise, when I was talking to the teaching staff, they were comfortable with the 7. So that would be something, yeah, if we want to change the metrics or something to that extent, I mean, that at least gives flexibility there.
Good night, Jamie.
All right, thank you.
Okay, I'm willing to change from average to minimum.
Just say average, what I'd hate to see happen is we've got 14 days.
Right.
And you get an average, that's okay. That's not the same thing as what the county's telling us we can do.
Okay, and just to be precise,
I
it
don't think
says,
Kevin Holly intended to change what the county was doing, so
it says,
thank you for that
it says
clarification.
consecutive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, any other comments? Yeah, I'm going back to the.
So did we have a second on that?
Yeah, I'll still second.
Okay, just wanted to confirm, didn't want to.
Metrics must be met on the dashboard, it says metrics must be met for a minimum of 10 consecutive days.
And then he
Now
changed that to
it's
But it
7. Yeah.
changed to
Now
7.
Right,
it's
right.
Change to
Just-
7.
I'm sorry.
Gotcha, yeah.
I should have
yeah.
said 7.
Yeah.
Metric must be met for a minimum of 7 consecutive days. That's on the dashboard.
Not averages.
So you're
Okay, I'm gonna revise my motion one more time. Move we approve the superintendent's recommendation to approve the hybrid plan with the schedule determined by the superintendent based on the District 75 metrics dashboard.
Yep.
7-day minimum, 7-day consecutive day minimum.
Second.
Holly,
Secretary, please call the roll.
Holly,
Aye.
Dupont,
Aye.
Erickson,
Aye.
Fingerhut, aye, Price,
Aye.
Gallegos,
Aye.
St. Clair.
Okay, all right. I rewrote the next one also a little bit. I move that the Board of Education adopt a resolution to select Christy Fingerhut, Board Secretary, as the Illinois Association of School Board Delegate from Mundelein Elementary School District 75.
Second.
Secretary, please call the roll.
Holly,
Aye.
St. Clair,
Aye.
Gallegos,
Aye.
Price,
Aye.
Fingerhut, aye, Erickson,
Aye.
Dupont.
Aye.
Skip the first one.
Just
I move that the Board of
Gotcha.
I move that the Board of Education of Mundelein Elementary School District 75 to accept the superintendent's recommendation to approve press number 105 as presented.
We were gonna amend that.
All right.
slightly.
You don't really want to do that.
Okay, I take that off.
I move that the Board of Education of Mundelein Elementary School District 75 accept the superintendent's recommendation to approve Press 105 as presented, including the revised policies as recommended by Board Council excluding footnotes.
Second.
Second. Okay,
Secretary, please call the roll.
St. Clair. Aye. Holly.
Aye.
Dupont.
Aye.
Erickson.
Aye.
Price.
Aye.
Fingerhut, aye. Gallegos.
Aye.
Are we doing employment or no? Executive session? It was a question mark. I know we're doing mitigation and minutes.
Yeah, we will have employment.
Okay. I move we go into executive session for the employment compensation, discipline of a specific employee of the public body, and litigation when an action against or affecting the behalf of the public body has been filed and is pending before a court or administrative tribunal, and discussion of minutes of meetings lawfully closed under the Open Meetings Act. Second. Secretary, please call the roll.
Holly.
Aye.
And that was Price?
Aye.
Okay, Gallegos.
Aye.
St. Clair. Aye. Fingerhut, aye. Erickson.
Aye.
Dupont.
Aye.
That's 10-17.
So, I asked, they were used for two different things. The other one wasn't one, and the scroll on the bottom, in original use. Was to have all the dates that were in the calendar. It was meant to be populated with what events would be going on in buildings that week.
Right, but it looked like some stuff was in there, and that's where some people were getting confused. because
Can
it's
Holly,
not
I know you can do this. You can sign your name and thing at the same time. So are you, is your term up? Is my, I think my term is up.
Your term is up. My term is
up.
Okay, right. Okay.
Yeah, I'm gonna
Because
talk about
it's off the website, so I can go back
And they
in.
were approving things, and that's where people were getting confused.
Yeah, the dates are wrong.
Yeah.
Us three and Rob.
And Rob.
And all of that.
Freddie.
So you
And
see,
Freddie.
and I-
Freddie.
and I- that's
So there'll
what
be a
I said.
two-year.
No.
A lot of people too. Go ahead.
Is it?
Okay.
Oh, yeah, because he only goes till
Four
the
4-year terms and one 2-year term.
one
Right.
2-year term,
It
because
probably
he
makes
just
sense to
fills
have
the
at
remainder of
least
that.
days off and conferences.
So 5
So
days.
that,
Yeah.
yeah, and I haven't done PPD, but that was the only thing you said, oh, please try this unit, Carol. So I was trying to think there was something.
Ready, Luke?
50 of my best enemies sign my petition.
Okay,
Halloween.
welcome back to open session. We have a couple action items that we're gonna do right here real quick. First, I move that we approve the September 22nd, 2020 executive session minutes.
Second.
Mr. Anderson, second. Secretary, please call the roll.
Holly.
Aye.
Erickson.
Aye.
Fingerhut, aye. Price.
Aye.
Gallegos.
Aye.
St. Clair. Aye. Dupont.
And I move that the Board of Education approve the settlement agreement with a former student, Jane Doe.
Second.
Second by Mrs. St. Clair. Secretary, please call the roll.
Holly.
Aye.
St. Clair. Aye. Gallegos.
Aye.
Price.
Aye.
Fingerhut, aye. Erickson.
Aye.
Dupont.
Aye.
I'm sorry to interject, but that name, the name has to be read. It has to be read the way it's on the
It's Ann Doe, not
recommendation.
Jane.
Can you reread the recommendation, please? It should be in your executive session file.
Oh, sorry, okay.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we're gonna do that last motion again, sorry, you guys. I move that the Board of Education of Mundelein Elementary School District 75 accept the superintendent's recommendation to approve the settle agreement with Kelsey Foster and the release with defendant labor ready pursuant to the terms reviewed by the board in executive session.
Second.
Mr. Dupont, seconded. Secretary, please call the roll.
Holly,
Aye.
Dupont.
Aye.
Sinclair. Aye. Gallegos.
Aye.
Price.
Aye.
Fingerhut. Aye. Erickson.
Aye.
Okay, President's prerogative. Wells was just talking about this. We have 5 members of the school board that are up for re-election coming this year next year in April. Just a couple of things for you. The petitions are available on the Lake County Clerk's website. You could start circulating them as early as
No.
September 22nd. The filing period for those applications is due December 14th through December 21st. The election is April 6th, 2021. Rob Dupont, Kevin Holly, Kurt Erickson, Wells Price, and Freddie Gallegos, our terms are all expiring and they will be up for election. There will be 4 4-year terms and 1 2-year term. 2-year term would be finishing out Alexandra Avila's term that Freddie was appointed to.
So does Freddie have to run for that, or?
No, anybody
So
can.
can run for
anybody
it.
can run for any
They're all
term?
open.
Okay.
Yeah,
Has to run for it.
Well, I mean.
Should he,
Taking away of
admit
any
that
free
he
will.
wants to run for something, does he have to? Do
No,
any
he
of
doesn't
you
have to, but
run for?
to a certain degree, if there could be a gentleman's agreement, that would maybe make life easier.
Yeah, so, gentlemen.
So here's
you
what I'd like
can't-
to do,
Go ahead.
since we are in open session, and I don't want to make anyone make any declarations right here. If you are going to run or don't want to run or some combination thereof, just let me know. And we can sort of take it from, just so we just have an idea if we need to, although we did have a few people that, that applied for Alexandria's position.
Yep.
And we can certainly encourage them to run in an open election, but just so we have an idea what's happening, okay? Does that seem fair? Okay?
Quick question, I'm sorry. Did we do the roll call and state the time when we went back into open session?
I did not.
I noted the time.
Okay, what time was that, Christy? What time did you have?
42.
Can we do a roll call just to make sure we did go back, so it's a moment of a record?
Holly,
Secretary, I'm here. I'm still here.
Sinclair. Here. Gallegos.
Here.
Price.
Here.
Fingerhut. Here. Erickson.
Here.
Dupont.
Here, but fading fast.
Yeah. Almost there.
Sit down.
Okay, one last thing. I know there's been some concern on some board members, because some of them have talked to me. And when Lisa and I had our pre-board meeting with Kevin last Thursday, I brought up some of the topics that were expressed to me. We had a good discussion about it. I think you got a couple emails the last couple of days that we're going to try to get more information out to us, so that we know what's being, I guess the big thing is we know what's being communicated to the community or parents that maybe we're not hearing if we're not a parent. And so just so you know that I took it seriously and we talked, and I think maybe more to come at a later date, but just want you to know that I heard, and I know there's been concerns because I've talked to some of you. So, so in the future, please let me know if there are specific things that you feel like we're missing or you're having issues with, just so we can keep the line of communication open. I think that's important to do because we only see each other once a month. Okay, sound good?
Well, I guess I would ask, if there's information you're seeking, you can call me also. And even I got called, I just, so I get for cutting and pasting, I left Wells off the team.
That's
Board question
terrible.
follow-up.
That's terrible.
I mean, that's when somebody sees it, you call me, because I'm not intentionally trying to do this stuff. So please feel free to call me if you think something's out there, something's coming up. I mean, I want to be able to know what's going on.
Well, you should have let us know Anna was out of the office. We would have gone over the list of emails more closely. I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? We are adjourned.
There we go.
Ooh, we got to use the gavel.
There it
Hey,
is.
Lisa, don't,
Hey, you hit it so hard you
10:48,
knocked the metal
yeah.
loose on it.
Oh my gosh, it did.
break it?
Did you end up getting it?
I got
Fine.
the text saying that you had a glitch